Good evening and welcome to the 34th meeting of the Milton Planning Board fiscal year 2024. I'd like to now call the meeting to order and begin by introducing the members of the Planning Board and our staff. Would you like to begin?
Sure. Cheryl Tagayas, Secretary.
Maggie Oldfield, member.
Jim Davis, member.
And on Zoom this evening, we have Sean.
Sean Fahey, member.
Thank you. And myself serving as chair. And the staff this evening, we have on Zoom, Tim.
Tim Zerwinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
And we would like to introduce you to our new Assistant Town Planner. Cheyenne, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne Frazier. I'm the new Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development. This is my first meeting, so I'm excited to see how this goes.
Good, welcome.
Welcome.
Glad to have you.
Welcome.
Yeah. And Julia.
Julia.
Great, thank you. So we can now go to our administrative items. The first item is we have 4 sets of minutes for approval. They are from April 9th, April 16th, the 24th, and the 29th. Has everyone had a chance to review those minutes?
I have,
Any questions or?
I only have a question on the 29th.
Okay.
Okay.
Right before the vote on the third page, it says, basically the last sentence, the bylaw should be respected and that an alternative project may be more detrimental. I mean, I'd love it to stay. We spent a lot of time talking about 40B and the hospital's kind of 40B threat. I don't know if it's appropriate to put that in there to say, you know, the alternative project was a 40B, which would have a much larger impact on the area.
So you could, since it wasn't actually proposed, maybe we say such as a 40B, just so it's not definitive that it was actually proposed, right?
Yeah, that's
So if after the word an alternative project, comma, such as a 40B,
A potential 40B?
potential 40B.
are you getting that, Julia?
Because that had a lot, I mean, that weighed heavily on
True.
me in my
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool, thanks, guys.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm good.
Amendment. Can I have a motion
Something to
to
the effect
approve?
of potential 40B.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of
Somewhere in
April 9th, April 16th, April 24th, and April 29th as amended. Go ahead, Sean.
Can I make one, Meredith, can I make one comment on the 9th? Cheryl, you caught some of the changes on the 9th. A couple of, if I could take you to the paragraph that starts with BID Milton trustee Tony, and down at the end of that, you've captured some changes. There were a couple of, I thought, relevant points that, and this could be handled right here, right now. Where it reads, Mr. Reardon stated that a reduction in size. Could we add the word building? Because that discussion was about reduction in the size of the building. So if we could put building, and the only other change I'd suggest there is where that sentence reads, let's see, bear with for a moment. Will not substantially change the, this was all about the stormwater management design. So that's, I guess, it wasn't changing the design of the project's impacts. It was altering the stormwater management design. So that was my only comment on that.
Sean, I thought though that building, well, reducing a size certainly changed the impervious area, but it would change other things too, like buffer, how much landscape you could put in a buffer zone. So I did think it was bigger than stormwater.
Okay, so I'm satisfied if we just add building size.
Sure.
Sure. If we just clarify that it's the building size that was referenced to for change.
Okay, so I will alter my motion to approve the minutes of April 9th as amended, April 16th, April 24th, and April 29th as amended.
Second? Is that a second? Second, yeah. All right. We'll do a roll call since Sean is on Zoom. Cheryl?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. Good. Okay, those minutes are approved. The next meeting dates that we have would be the June regular scheduled meetings of June 13th and June 30th. So if everybody could mark that. And I did want to just mention, we should be hearing from Nick Milano, but there's a chance that we will be invited to an executive session meeting on the litigation on June 11th, possibly, but we don't know, but maybe just pencil June 11th in. I don't know if it,
So Meredith,
Kevin Martin is
sorry, can we go back to the 30th?
Sure.
It's actually, the 27th would be a Thursday, the 30th is a Sunday.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
the 13th and the 27th,
Right.
yes.
Potential on the
And the
11th.
potential on the 11th.
Potential on the 11th. If not, it might be the second meeting, but we'll,
There's a meeting, Cheryl, on the 11th for the CPC.
CPC, right.
okay. And that's,
Okay.
we'll wait to hear about that. So then we can go to Tim, the Director of Planning, for your update.
Not a ton of update. I did want to give Cheyenne maybe another minute or two to just let folks know her story. It's her first week. She started on Monday. We are very excited and lucky to have her. I've spent a little bit of time kind of driving her around, showing her the sites, all of the very unique and exciting things that are going on in Milton. But Cheyenne, not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you want to tell folks a little bit about your background and where you're coming from, and anything that you think would be interesting for folks.
So I was born and raised in Southern California, more specifically Irvine. I went to Cal State Fullerton, moved here in 2020, where sorry, that's my cat. So I moved here in 2020 for law school, where I graduated in May. So while I am a lawyer, I do not practice law. I went into commercial real estate about 2 years ago, and that's kind of how I got into zoning and permitting and eventually planning. So I'm excited to kind of take the reins on this role and see what we can all come up with and work alongside people.
So we're thrilled to have Cheyenne. Different sort of perspective. I think every assistant director that comes through brings something new to the table. So I think she's getting a little bit of a crash course in 40A, in the zoning bylaw, in some of the projects and plans that we've been working on. And I think, as, we get new applications coming in, she'll obviously be fulfilling, some of the role that the assistant, typically does in terms of technical review and assisting, us in that stuff. But I'm always on the lookout for, trying to make sure that we create a portfolio of work for the assistant director that kind of meets their skill set and their interests. So, we'll be keeping an eye on that. And again, we are fully staffed up. So we're ready to tackle the next new and exciting thing that comes down the pike. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Great. Welcome again. That's great. Okay, so we can now, if there's anyone for Citizens Speak, we can now invite you to come speak now, or anyone on Zoom, if anyone from the public. Or if you would like to speak later on something on the agenda, that would be perfectly fine. Tim, are you seeing anybody for public Citizen Speak?
If you can use the raise hand function on Zoom, that would indicate that, and we've got William Atwood. If you can say your name and address for the record, please.
William Atwood, 88 Columbine Road, Milton.
Great, welcome.
Hello, everyone. My wife and I wanted to speak tonight because we've lived in Milton for 29 years. We lived in our current home on Columbine Road for 22 years. We have an ongoing problem with the Goddard School. Originally, it was going to be, as you might remember, taking place in the historic Hoosick building. But when that burned down, they redesigned it for a really large school. And we found, now that we've been back in our home, that it's really affected the quality of life, us, and we don't have any recourse, really. We've tried to contact the owner, but there are several main issues, and we want to know if the planning board could help us resolve some of these, because it's really affecting the quality of our life here in our home. First, the lights are left on building all night unnecessarily. Second, when Sonny was making his pitch for the building, he said that he would have like 10 children on the playground at a time, very small groups. We find there's 40 to 70 children and adults on the playground with very, very loud noise levels, with screams and throughout the day. We have invested a significant amount of money putting in some evergreens on our side of the property, but because the school is built up so high, it doesn't really have as big an impact at this time with the noise. And Sonny's been unwilling to put up any additional landscaping on the playground side that would shield the playground better for us. Honestly, it's just a very massive school. It's not like the village school on Randolph Avenue or the center school on Canton Avenue. It's really an industrial sized school. And we're disappointed at what a huge impact it's had on our life here in Milton. And we wanted to know if there's anything we can do in this situation.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Are there any other hands up for citizens speak?
I am not seeing any, no.
Okay, all right.
So can I just speak to at least one of the comments that Mr. Atwood mentioned? The lights and controls on the lights are one of the conditions in the special permit for that project. So I think you could go to the building commissioner and ask him to enforce that provision of the special permit.
He did that.
He did that and nothing's happened? All right, well then, I guess we should have a conversation.
The wife.
Yeah, I guess we should have a conversation, Tim, with the building commissioner about enforcement of the special permit.
Site plan approval.
Oh, well, all right, the site plan approval condition, because lighting was, you're right, since it's a daycare center, it's not subject to special permit. But lighting is something that we could have some impact on in terms of that decision, and we did. And we required that they be dimmed down and turned off after hours. And so
They're in violation of
they're in violation of the site plan approval then. And what's the recourse for being in violation?
Yeah, we can certainly do that and have a meeting with the building commissioner. I'll have to go back and review the the specific conditions around lighting. I know this one and frankly every special permit and site plan approval that the planning board deals with. We kind of work diligently around the exterior lighting. I think the issue that Mr. Atwood identified is actually the lights on the inside of the building. Which I'm not sure if the site plan approval addresses that at all. There may be some way that we can kind of interpret lighting a little bit more broadly than exterior lighting, but we'll give that a look. I understand the issue, and it's kind of an unforeseen thing. I don't think anyone anticipates that anyone's going to leave their lights on all night, and so maybe it's something that doesn't just get specifically addressed. But one way or the other, we'll continue to follow up with the building commissioner and see what enforcement options there are relative to the requirements that are in the site plan approval.
And then can you also follow up about whether the landscaping has been installed per the approved plan? Because there was a time they came to us and it wasn't per the approved plan. So we do have, as we said, limited things that we can review, but landscaping is another one. And so we did spend time on that, and It was very disappointing when they came in before, and what had been shown as a pretty robust landscape plan, in fact, didn't look very robust at all in person. So, I think it just takes, someone that, since it's the enforcement official, going to the site with the approved landscaping plan and confirming that all the materials were installed per that plan.
And maybe because the building commissioner is relatively new to town, maybe we should invite him to come to one of our meetings and introduce ourselves and, sort of explain the problems. I could explain a lot of problems. And then, and because I see both sides of the issues. But you also are, as an applicant in a business in a neighborhood, you really do want to be a good neighbor. So sometimes you do have to do things that aren't necessarily expressly stated in your permit or site plan, just because you're part of a neighborhood.
And Tim, maybe I was going to suggest possibly reaching out to Marion as well and going over these issues, and maybe working with Marion to explain and work with Joe to
Yeah, certainly.
take care of some of these
we'll let
issues.
Marion. Yeah, as counsel for the applicant, we'll let her know, that these, these issues have come up.
Definitely. All right. Good. Thank you. We'll be working on that. So thank you for coming. And now we don't have any new business tonight, so we can move on to our old business. And the first thing we have is discussion of East Milton Overlay Zoning and next steps. And do we have Josh with us, Tim?
I just promoted him. He should be joining us. Well,
Great.
Good
Welcome,
evening.
Josh. Good evening.
Josh Fiala, MAPC, Principal Planner. Happy to be with you all again.
Great. Thank you.
It-
So Josh,
Would you like me to?
yes, if you want to begin with sort of going through the presentation of your survey results,
Yes, that'd be great.
that would be great.
Can you all see that presentation now?
Yes.
Great. Yes, we wanted to share the results from the previous community meeting and where we think the recommendations shape up from there. This includes community feedback both from the community meeting we held and also the following community survey, which was hosted online and gathered additional feedback as well. So thank you for having us again for that. So the community meeting was back in March. We had probably in the neighborhood of 45 or so attendees. Some of those were participating via live polling in the meeting. Others filled out some paper survey forms with the interactive questions. And then we had the post-meeting online survey, which drew another 28 respondents, which is a good way to round out the feedback. So a total of just over 70 residents were participating and providing us feedback to refine the zoning for East Milton Square. And most self-identify as East Milton Square residents, 63%. Another 24% identify as living in the surrounding neighborhoods. So very knowledgeable and interested respondents who are located in that part of town. So I'll just go through item by item with the major features of the zoning, which we gathered this final feedback on, or I guess feedback to help us draft the final recommendations, not necessarily the final feedback. Feedback will continue as this heads toward hopefully adoption at some point. The zoning boundary was the first of these items where we had talked, of course, with the board and in previous community meetings and had come to this. What's highlighted in the thicker black outline on this slide, which, as you recall, does remove some of the existing business district parcels, which are currently residential in use only, and it does add some parcels which are currently commercial use, which are not currently included in the business district. So this is the boundary which we put forward and explain the rationale behind it. 58% of the respondents, both from in-meeting and survey, suggested either strong support or support for the proposed boundary. 24% were neutral, and there were 18% which opposed. So I think that's actually a pretty strong indication that we're pretty close to having the boundary about right, and feel pretty good about moving forward with that. I think the rationale and logic behind it is very strong and has a very, what I would maybe describe as a very surgical approach to improving the business district in East Milton Square with the mixed use development, which is contemplated through our zoning. The next was specifically about some of those changes I just described, whether respondents agreed with removing the current residential properties or those properties that are also split zoned and residential today. 56% agreed, either strongly supporting or supporting removing those parcels. Again, 21% neutral and 22% opposed. So a little less support, but still reasonable support. If you think about also those neutral parties who didn't necessarily have a strong opinion one way or another. And then adding the commercial parcels in, which we did, there was very strong support for. 70% of respondents thought that they strongly supported or supported that addition, with only 4% opposing and a quarter of those in the neutral category. So I feel like our interpretation of this is that it shows relative support and gives us pretty good confidence moving in this direction. Maybe I'll just go through all the feedback, and then you all can sort of let me know how you interpret these results, but that's how we would interpret. Some additional comments that we heard were sort of reinforcing of what we saw in the response data there, and really focused on restricting uses for even residential abutting properties. So we've thought about in our recommendations some ways to do that, primarily with setbacks and where height may occur, which I'll get to, and concern that we've heard and discussed previously around the post office building and not wanting that to be removed from the commercial roster. And I think we have ways to accomplish that as well. So our proposal in terms of uses, moving on from the boundary, was to focus on those uses which we would want to see in the future, and removing those which we might not want to see more of. There are some of these existing uses in the district today. Those, of course, can remain and would be grandfathered and can function into the future as long as they want to. But those that we might not want to see additional future uses of include sales rooms and repair shops for motor vehicles, garages, filling/gas stations, storage warehouses, or undertaker funeral home type uses. Again, focusing on those which are creating the vibrant mixed-use center which residents have envisioned through really detailed and I would say lengthy processes at this point to articulate that vision, which these are inconsistent with. Also not wanting to see residential uses of single-family homes, for example, which are allowed in those other residential districts and are allowed in the business district today. The feedback was very strong in this case. 83% of respondents strongly support this editing of the allowed uses or support. 10% were neutral, 5% opposed. So that's very strong support for that approach. In terms of building height, we also, I think, have pretty clear indication where to head in this work. So we had, again, done some analysis about where a building height might be most appropriate in the district, really focusing on its center point on Adams Street, Granite Ave, around the Central Plaza, over the highway, et cetera. And you see that highlighted in the reddish outline here. Each of the parcels in the green tones are those which the analysis showed could support some additional height. Our proposal for height was to have mixed use by right for a 3-story, 45-foot height, which would include site plan review, which would still allow the planning board review of those proposed projects. 76% of respondents strongly support that direction. I think that's, again, very solid support, and I think would be a very big step forward for the zoning in East Milton Square to have that type of project allowed with site plan review. 3% were neutral, 22% opposed, and you can see in the diagram on the screen that that's the type of scale that we're talking about. We also contemplated and have discussed with you all and proposed in this meeting increasing that height via special permit and incentives, either to 4 stories and 55 feet or 5 stories and 65 feet. And you can see in those pie charts the feedback there. So less support for 4 stories, 55 feet, but maybe still enough to consider it under the right circumstances in the right locations. I think those are 2 important qualifications, that the circumstances in terms of incentives and what might be provided from a developer in that case and the location need to be right. And I think we can define that in the zoning. And then moving to a 5-story or 65 feet height, you see a bunch of red on that pie chart, and it's pretty strongly opposed. And this is what we've seen in terms of the strongest opposition of any of the characteristics we've talked about so far. So I think 5-story or 65 feet really is a step too far in terms of the community perspective. Another area where we experienced some pushback both in the meeting and in the results was around parking. And so I think more promising is the notion of requiring 1 space per unit for residential, which showed 48% of strong support and support combined with 2% in the neutral category, or two respondents in the neutral category, excuse me, not percentage. And about a similar amount of opposition, right around that halfway mark. And less support for moving to less required parking for commercial uses. I think there's a lot of sensitivity around the need for commercial businesses to have appropriate amount of parking so that the square can function appropriately. And so we have some recommendations about how to adjust this based on the community feedback here and get the parking right. And then a lot of support for continuing through the zoning as much as we possibly can to focus on the primary concerns of traffic and parking and how we can best mitigate and help resolve traffic and parking concerns through future investments that might be related to development projects. So I will, maybe I'll pause there before I turn to how this translates into recommendations in our view and just see if there's any thoughts or feedback about, I know some of you were present at the meeting itself, so if you have thoughts about that or the results I just shared.
Josh, just a question. How long was the online survey up for?
Over a month, I believe we let it run.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just wondering if 71 responses, is that considered a good sampling?
Yeah, when we think about the surveys in a planning process, it's not necessarily sampling as you would consider it for a scientific survey. I think consistent with this process, the results are similar to the number of participants that we saw in the first round of our community engagement. In the fall, we had a similar pairing of a community meeting and a community survey. I think we had a little bit of drop off from that session. I think we had maybe, if I recall correctly, closer to 100 participants in that round. I think that it's a reasonable amount for this type of process. I think it was good that we had a very strong participation from residents of the area, which is impacted most closely by this zoning considerations. And I think that what we're seeing is sort of what I would frame as a consistent community conversation, which might not be the exact same participants and voices involved, but I think there has been, at least from our perspective, continuity in the types of comments that we've heard, but also in coming to an understanding with the community about the types of things that might want to be included in the zoning. So I think that's where we're starting to see this feedback really start to concretize.
So I have another question, Josh. You spent one of our meetings and presentations discussing the parking challenges. I think it's in large part due to parcel size, and it's been identified as one of the impediments to redevelopment of parcels currently is the current parking requirements are nearly impossible to meet. So I just wanted you to explain if you're going to do some kind of test fit analysis, if you're going to adjust your recommendations, so that my concern is to codify something that may not work, to have gone through this whole effort and still be at a place where you don't see change come in through this zoning because it's too difficult to meet the requirements. I just want to make sure that you're building in some testing of some of this.
Yeah, I think, yes, we can do some testing of the final zoning recommendations. I think that's reasonable. The other thing that we are integrating in the zoning draft language is shared parking and off-site parking mechanisms, which I think would provide an avenue for both the community to feel comfortable with the parking that is provided, but also for a developer to find a viable path forward. And I think that those two, including those two provisions in the zoning language, provide that sort of compromise tightrope between the real and perceived issues of parking in the square and also, as you mentioned, just physical viability to create a redevelopment project.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I'm wondering, do you know how the 18% who opposed the change in your first, how did they identify as? Were they residents in the district, or were they outside of the district, or like for the boundary? Do you know where they were?
I don't know offhand, but I can look and see if I can tease that out of the data we have.
Okay, thanks.
And I guess along with that, Josh, I'm trying to, the 71 respondents, do you have any idea like what percentage that is of the East Milton Square population? I know it's a really hard thing to quantify, but it'd be nice to know if 2% or 5% or 10% of the neighborhood is actually taking the survey.
I think it was a 60-40 percentage split. I think 63% maybe. Is that correct, Josh?
I'm just talking about like the total
It's
people that live in and around the area. I mean, I don't know if we drew a circle, would there be 1,000 people and 71 are taking the survey?
Jim, it's Sean. Just a thought on that. If you consider the number of people in the precinct, even if you consider the number that vote in the precinct and compare the 71 to the number of people that are, registered voters in the precinct, it's, first, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Josh, thanks for the work. You put a lot of effort into this, and it's really good. So we appreciate that. But I am also one that is really concerned that we have so few people responding.
Yeah.
And to that point, if the 18% oppose it, are they, the 18% who are right next to the boundary?
Right.
That's kind of what I was interested in.
Oh, I don't think we'll have data enough to judge that. I think that we would have potentially, depending on, we can cross-tabulate survey results from the online survey in terms of where people self-identified as where they live and then the answers that they give. but we would only know the extent to which they self-identified as East Milton Square residents or surrounding neighborhood residents. I think that's as fine a grained as we would be able to get.
Right. So I did, I feel like we're narrowing in on the boundary. I think seems like there was, a good consensus on some of the changes that have been made. I do feel that, taking the post office out, I think that's a building, it's on the National Register. I think that's a building that we don't want to encourage change. It's a beautiful building. It's a commercial use. I think it's something that if we ever wanted to add it back into the district, but I think that's one of the most spectacular buildings over in East Milton. And I just would not want to encourage changes made to that building or any demolition at some point. And then also just, I guess, going to the height, and you had the pie charts with the 4 and the 5. 5 clearly, very strongly opposed. But I also see the 4 story as being very strongly opposed. I only see 23% either support or strongly support. The rest is neutral, oppose, and strongly oppose. I heard through, a lot of the concerns when we were doing the 440 Granite Avenue was 4 stories was just out of, it did not fit in with what is currently 1 and 2 stories generally in the area. And I agree, maybe we can push some height here. There are buildings that I think, and areas that adjacent to 440 Granite that would be perfect for 3 stories. But I think what I was really hearing was what really fits in, especially with the topography, which is unique in the site compared to the Lower Mills, Central Avenue, business districts, that 2 and 3 stories, 2 and 3 stories would be most appropriate. We have a recent, a great project recently is that was done was where the Elliott Physical Therapy is. It's a 2-story building. It's got a great use, very active commercial use on the first floor and apartments upstairs. And it doesn't require an overabundance of parking. It's just very appropriately scaled. I think definitely we could go to 3 stories if we could find a way, and this, I don't want to jump ahead, but my concern is some of the buildings that are over 75 years old and some that are maybe 100 years old now, that some of those buildings, if they're wanting to increase the height on that, how we would incorporate into our zoning that they would be able to add an additional story or 2 stories, but that they would have to preserve the original main structure. So we don't lose sort of the integrity and the charm and the character of some of the neoclassic, beautiful buildings. Abbey Park, for example, is a beautiful building. If that was to be added on, how would we put zoning in to have a step back to allow for extra height, but preserve the sort of the integrity of that historic original structure? So that's getting ahead of ourselves, but I just feel that there was a lot of consensus, especially when you showed 73% were in favor of a 3-story, or 76%. So there was a lot of consensus around that height, and I did not see that support for the 4-story or the 5.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, and I would suggest that we don't need to keep pushing on the 4-story either, but I do think that what we should probably do is write it up as a draft zoning recommendation for you all at the board and the town, and perhaps then take it out and you can have it in the future. And I agree, like if the market can respond to a 3-story mixed use project, and you might actually see, a viable development or 2 that would bring that vitality and what's desired in the square over the next few years. Like, this probably won't happen straight away. But then I think that's great. You could leave it alone and let it be. But if you make these zoning changes at 3 stories with site plan review for a mixed use redevelopment, and you don't see any movement from the real estate market,
Right.
then you might want to, pull that language that we've prepared for you for the 4-story incentive-based approach off the shelf, and maybe think about getting that also integrated into this overlay district. But I agree. Maybe it's too much at this moment in time, but there might be a reason to do it in the future.
I think that's a good sort of a strategy on, because just mixed use in itself will be a change, and we want to see it, but we want to make sure we're able to park it and address people's concern with height. So.
Yeah, so my concern with that is I don't want to scare people in having a parallel, or two options. To your point, I think there's change already happening, and to even put out there that there's a possibility of something else more, that might cause confusion and alarm, and then it might cause people to kind of say, you know what, I don't want anything, so I'm not really sure. I don't know if I have an opinion on that right now.
Okay.
I think we're going to hear when Falcone's building goes up and when 440 Granite goes up. We'll know almost immediately what the residents think.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's a good point. It's interesting. And once that activity starts, the opportunity to gain the attention of the people that are living in that area, I think, rises. So just a data point here, when we come back to talking about 71 people, so there were 2,100 registered voters in 7, and there's 2,200 registered voters in 6. So you think about those numbers of people that are registered voters, and we're working with the opinion of 71 people. And I don't know. I don't know if there's any way, Josh, to gain more input. But when you think of 4,300 registered voters, generally in that area or in that general area, and we have 71 people that are participating, the only conclusion I can come to is we really don't have a good understanding of the point of view of people.
So maybe what we could do is see what Josh's recommendations are, and then, maybe there's a distribution of some kind of a flyer that with a QR code that can link to the presentation. I think my experience has been until something's a little more concrete, it's hard for people to respond. I think we did get feedback. Someone came into one of our meetings and said they were confused by the survey. There's kind of a language, an urban design or planning kind of language that not everyone's familiar with. And so you might not get some participation because of that. And, one of the things I think about the surveys that's a little challenging is you can't kind of explain what a consequence of a certain answer is. Like you can say, I want more parking, but if that means that your whole ground floor is parking and your active use moves up to the second floor, is that what you think is a good solution? Or, like tease out some of those questions and answers a little bit more, Josh? It's like when I looked at some of those questions, I kind of was trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who wasn't familiar with some of this language. So in terms of my suggestion to people's comments about 71 respondents is if you develop it a little further, then let's get some further outreach for feedback on that rather than trying to go back to the survey itself.
Right. Is anyone?
Cheryl,
Yes.
Can I just follow up with
Sure.
Cheryl? I think your idea of some form of a mailing might be helpful. I really do feel we have to find another way to connect with people because I just feel we're not connecting with them. We should be able to get more participation. And Josh, when Cheyenne's predecessor Josh was here, Josh often spoke of survey and the mechanics of survey and the number of people. And I'm sure if he was here today, he would be saying that 71 is representative. But when I look at the registered voters, the ones I just said, 2,100 and 2,200, 4,300 people, and we only have 71 people. I have deep concern that we really don't have a good understanding of how people feel.
Okay. That's good. Maybe we can keep the survey up, the online survey up longer. We have somebody from the public who would like to join us. You want to come? And comment? And if you could just state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Andy D'Amato, 26 Pierce Street. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 7. I'm also a member of the East Milton Neighborhood Association Board. So quickly on the survey, there wasn't a lot of outreach, to Cheryl's point. I don't think a lot of people knew what was going on. I mean, even a flyer saying, you know, do this survey and post it at community places like the Plate or, wait, I can't even believe I said that. Wow. Let's go to Starbucks, you know. Wow, that's weird. All right, so, you know, and the QR code's excellent. You just boom. Even for people who don't use a QR code, you see it. There's a survey going on, because if you wanted 1,000 signatures, you know, on the height, I could get those for you in a week. So there's people that want to participate. I don't think the mechanism of this survey really worked very well. I don't think the outreach, I didn't see anything in the Milton Times, maybe a little thing would have been nice, you know. So anyhow, that's a little side thing. That's not why I came up to speak. So I sat on the original steering committee at East Milton Square that morphed into something bigger that became the Barrett Report. I participated in a ULI TAP. I was intricately involved in the first Falcone project. I was in a small group that met with the developers, the Falcones. We had numerous, you know, public forums. I met with a lot of neighbors. Same thing in the Falcone Cochran, 440 Granite. We met up at Cunningham Park with a lot of neighbors. I held and attended many community meetings. I say this because the consensus is consistent, and it is that the residents of East Milton Square do not want any buildings over 3 stories. It's not, I don't know why we're talking about this. I mean, it is, you could go back to the Barrett Report, those little dots we put on it. No, the answer is no. And if you want to ignore the wishes of the residents of East Milton Square, go ahead and try to push for 4 stories. And it's just really kind of bothers me that we keep going back to this. Okay, well maybe on Granite Ave and Adams. Well, no, we don't want, it's a flat topography. I think you mentioned that, and that's what I wanted to talk about. If you start putting towers up on Granite Ave because it abuts the highway, I get that concept, right? You know, okay, no one's really affected. Well, it is, there's shadows, and I don't want to get into that whole thing. But it sort of makes like this picket fence around a residential neighborhood that, okay, right now, you know, it's starting to get its character back. Now, back 10, 15 years ago, some beautiful buildings on Adams Street, on Adams Mechanic, there was a beautiful building there. The architecture was great. There were Corinthian columns. There were coins on the side. It got stripped down, you know, and now it's a horrible looking building, you know, and the one next to it as well. So there was some great architecture in East Milton Square, and there still can be. The stuff that's there, you saw what Abbey Park did to their building. And a lot of people came up to me and said, I never even saw that building before, until they accentuated it. So I don't think bigger buildings surrounding a small residential and sort of village type feel is appropriate nor wanted. I mean, it is clear as far as everybody I talk to, you know, and I have a problem with the special permit to get it bigger. I mean, you know, all those meetings I went to and you know, sat here with you people in a variety for 440 Granite. Oh my goodness, you know, I was 20-something meetings. No. I mean, I would rather have something And I think most people would rather have something you put together. These are the rules, this is it, end of sentence, These special meetings just turn into 20, 30 meetings. It's a taxing, maybe that's why you're only getting 71%. People are getting exhausted by this, especially the people I know. Some people said they had problems with, with the survey. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, I think it's time to, preserve what we have and maybe incentivize restoration of some of these buildings, in terms of, maybe you can put in, commercial or some sort of shop on the bottom if you restore this building back to similar character. I think that would be fantastic for all of Milton, as well, especially, people who live around the neighborhood. Some of those things were stripped, and it was a shame, really. So parking, I understand what you're saying, Cheryl, but no. I disagree with it. Listen, if you can't fit the parking at one space per unit, build a smaller building. Parking is an issue. And I know there's an enforcement issue. I'd love to see that taken care of. And Tim, if you're listening, we need a loading zone. I don't care where you put it. I don't even care if you take 3 parking spots, but it is getting unbelievably dangerous in East Milton Square now. Right now, if you try to drive through there, there's 18-wheelers, because that's the trucks people used to deliver. You could say bring smaller trucks. There are no smaller trucks. Call the trucking company. Tell them, I want a smaller truck. They're going to tell you, we don't have smaller trucks anymore. That's just the way it works now. So you get these big double parked, guys just doing their job. I get it. But they're wheeling, 3-wheelers across the street, down the street. Cars in the morning are getting upset. They're whizzing around, going into the oncoming lane. At the same time, you got pedestrians without a crosswalk between the 2 biggest draws in the square, which are Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. So it's like a game of Frogger. Showing my age there. So we need a loading zone to fully appreciate what the parking situation is there. So that's my rant. I guess that's, Thank you very much.
Rant, thank you.
Yes, next. You want to?
It is, I'm serious.
in.
That was the best information I've heard all night.
Introduce yourself and
Yep. Hi, my name's John Cohane.
you can use the microphone a little bit closer.
My name's John Cohane. I'm select board member. Select board member, town meeting member, member of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. The first thing I'd like to say is we need to put where the meeting's being held, because I was here and left and I looked through everything and I couldn't find it. It wasn't until I saw the camera and saw where this room was that I knew where the meeting was. Anyway, important little note. I hear Andy, but I also hear what you're asking for. What we need is numbers. We need to get people, 70 signatures, 70 people's not enough. And I agree with you. We need to get, and we need to, however you can decide to do that. I'm happy to help. I know these people we'll work with them. Numbers speak, and we need to get numbers. And I hearing just this, I will take it upon myself to organize to do that.
Reach out to the East Milton Neighborhood Association. We'll, if you get a formal request, we'll push it.
I found out you got to knock on doors. People just, they're busy, they have tons of things going on. They're concerned, but they just don't have the time for it. You got to knock on the doors and get it to them. And so I'm willing to help do that. So, because we need numbers. We need numbers to say, this is how the people feel. And it doesn't look too good here tonight. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
John,
Yeah.
hey, John, this is Sean. Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not there tonight. My travel schedule didn't allow. But thanks for coming to the meeting. If we were to post the survey within the businesses in East Milton Square, would that help? I'm wondering if, many people, obviously a lot of people walk into Dunkin' Donuts and walk into Starbucks, but if we were able to post that this survey is, we're requesting their input, how do you think that would work?
It's funny you mentioned that because I thought about the same thing. I think that's a good idea. I think that would be a real good idea to put, a little, you have that little container, you could put a sign on it with the flyers in it. I still would, it would help me in my new job. I still would like to knock on doors and talk to people because I think that's the single biggest thing is getting to them. It just, people are busy. I get it. Don't want to get involved. So you got to go to them. So yes, Sean, I agree. That is great. I would do that.
We would need the business owners to allow us to do that.
Yeah.
But,
We've done that.
Yeah.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Is it good, not good?
Josh and I went all around town and posted things everywhere.
Do you want a microphone, Julia, just to?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You want it?
Just so they can hear.
No, I know.
Okay, no, all right.
But it didn't really come to much.
But that's why I'm saying
Yeah.
it is. It's what it is. It's what we did, and it's what you have to do. And I'm willing to, we'll get some people together. This has a huge impact on East Milton Square. It warrants the effort to do this. So I hear you talking about, trying to do something like that. So keep me in the loop because I will help.
Great. Thank you so much.
And maybe even focusing on Cunningham and Collycott schools. Sending out an email blast, putting it in the backpacks so people know what's going on. I know the school department has, sent out lots of information through their backpack and email program about all sorts of, political things going on in town. So I would think that they would be willing to help out in this since it is the neighborhood schools.
And the other thing that I think works is they have it in the flyer at the store, they get it in the backpack, they get it somewhere else. Eventually, they go,
Right.
what the heck is this?
Repetition. I'm going to take
What
the
is this?
survey.
And they start to look at it, So I think it's all of those that would help. But I just am here. I just heard you, and I was listening as I was coming back. I was here earlier, but I didn't come downstairs. So I know we could figure out a way to get, if that's a step we need to get more involvement. That's something I think we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. That's great.
And I do think, Andy, you're being a little too kind saying that it's a picket fence. I think it's more of an 8-foot ugly vinyl solid fence, not a picket fence.
I meant to say stockade.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but we've been to the farmers market, the library. I don't talk to these meetings.
Yeah.
But we've done our best to try to get the word out about stuff, and people are still like in the dark. Years, like a couple of years later, saying, I had no idea that there was a memory care center going up at 111 Highland Street.
We put a group of people together. We knocked on every door in East Milton in 2 days. So it's not a gargantuan task.
Yeah.
It's not. Especially the more people you get. It is. It's people just. And what Cheryl was saying, yes, once it comes down and people start to pay attention, then they'll see it. But we're trying to nip it before that point.
Right.
Yes, they will see it then, but it'd be better to get it now than have to do a revote or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, we have somebody here at the table, so that's okay.
I agree with the prior two speakers. I'm Warren Lizio, P7, town meeting member and East Milton Neighborhood Association.
And your address for the record?
160 Alvin Avenue.
What's your name?
Warren Lizio. I agree with what Andy and John said just before this. Number one, I guess just based off the prior conversation, to Cheryl's point, I agree that the survey was quite confusing. I had somebody actually call me on the phone and say, what does this mean? right? And that's just a layperson in the neighborhood. So if possibly we make it a little clearer to understand, I think we'll also get more engagement there. So I know this is really important to everybody. I mean, the Milton Arts Center was full. It was packed, right? So this is super important to everybody. And I think that we would get a great turnout if we just engaged them a little bit more. And then to some of the speaks thoughts that Josh had before, and he's doing a great job, by the way. I really appreciate everything he's doing. I know it's not easy to work in Milton sometimes, but he's doing a great job. So the 3 stories, I think that that's probably the max that we want. I think when I think of like what East Milton can look like, it can be a very vibrant, walkable, engaging community, but it doesn't need to be cold, throwing shadows and creating wind tunnels. To do that, I think we want to make this a lively area. We want to make it like more prideful of what it already is, and I think we can do that without making it much larger. And then to the point of shared parking, I know this is such a tough thing because parking, you need it. Renters want it. They absolutely need it. Somebody's not going to buy a condo unless they have parking. Somebody's not going to move their kids in unless they have a place to put a minivan, right? So we have to figure out parking, but shared parking is also not the answer. And when I think of shared parking, I think of things like HubSpot. If anybody's familiar with that, that's an app where you basically rent out parking spaces by the hour. Like, you know, that's easy way to shut down parking spaces for anybody. You know, people will sell a parking space on Newbury Street, right? So, and that's a public space. So we really don't want to get there because that's going to impact the businesses that are part of East Milton. And if you don't have parking, you don't have businesses. I've seen that on Tremont Street in the South End, where they've reduced the number of parking spaces to create extra wide bike lanes and bus stops. And over the course of 3 blocks, we've lost enough parking spaces to effectively put a business out. So you need parking to facilitate businesses. And you know, I guess my last point is that, you know, my understanding, and it's been a while, but in the city of Boston, they don't consider the financial viability of a project when they look at it in terms of whether or not it fits in, whether or not it should be permitted, right? So and maybe Tim can speak a little bit more to this, but or possibly Cheryl, but you know, the profit and economic viability of the project really shouldn't have any bearing on the town. Right, we're here to serve the residents. We're here to make this a nice environment, and we should make it developer friendly by making sure that developers can. This is a whole other tangent, but have somebody to talk to and get good information, but not necessarily like have a vested interest in their financial success. That's nice. Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah, and it's interesting you should say that because when I went through the special permit process, I have to say no one cared about the economics and the financial hardship that my family went through, and all the mitigation things that were put in place and the time it took, 3 years to get it done. It was said to me, it doesn't matter how much it costs you. It doesn't matter. This is what you want. This is for your personal gain. It doesn't matter. So I kind of have that in the back of my head, that you do things because you're committed to doing something and you might, you know, have a financial benefit, but it really is not the driving force. So I kind of, that's my experience too, in Milton, not just in Boston, but in Milton.
I'll just provide one comment to what Warren said about Boston. My business, we do work in Boston, and we were doing work in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood when they were going through a planning effort. It was called JP Rocks. And when they do that, they do economic feasibility financial analysis as part of their zoning work. So they were trying to see if they could get more affordability by giving more height as a bonus, that if you can get more height if you do more affordability. And they raised it to a level that they thought would work, but it cut all development off because the projects didn't pencil out. So it's not really about whether, you know, somebody is sort of being held to a standard. It's whether, you know, developers do it based on the numbers. You know, so if they buy a piece of property and they can't make the numbers work, then they're not going to buy it. So my worry is really just not to put something in place that we have a lot of hope is going to bring a vitality, but yet it's not going to, because it's not going to work. And it's a test. That's why I asked if we can do a test, because it's a give and take, and I don't know where it lands, that it makes the most economic sense. But once you set the zoning to, what you do is you set the valuation. Like the valuation of the property right now is going to be based on speculation, right? Somebody thinks, this is at least some developers, a lot in Boston. Boston's changing now too in this regard. But they would base their offers on what they could get approved, So it's not what the underlying zoning was. Like they might say, I'll buy that piece of property for X dollars, but if I get 10 more units or if I get 100 more units, it's Y dollars. We don't really have that kind of a process here. So what ends up happening is the 40B has been the alternative that sets the price. So the benefit, I think everybody who's been working in East Milton for so long and wanting to get zoning done understands that when you have zoning in place, that you're better off than that fallback. The question is, where is the right place? I think Josh said that, Judy Barrett said that. I mean, every planner's been saying that, right? And so the question from my experience has been, is 3 the sweet spot? I don't know, because of the lot sizes and the parking requirements. But if they can test it out a little bit further, it's really, some of it's a physical test, like Josh started to do on the parking. With small lot sizes, cars have, parking spaces and turning radii. It's not about whether you want to put them there, it's how much can fit there. And then that's why things haven't changed a lot, in some of these areas, because they can't make the stuff fit. Because you can't, anyway. So it's not that I'm trying to impose any of my ideals on anything. I'm just trying to bring to bear some of my experience and cautions and asking Josh to help tease it out for everyone. Because I don't think the neighbors want to end up with something that doesn't give them some benefit either after all this process, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, the goal would be the same, is that you get the zoning, which will allow for the things that would provide the vibrancy without too much impact.
And that's what hopefully East Milton the overlay does for us, is making it more of a streamlined process.
Right.
And did you guys push for this?
My experience.
Did you push for this change?
Well, let me say, Jim, because...
Well, let them answer that, please.
But
Did you guys push for this change, or is this coming from the planning board? Do you want to...
East Milton has been wanting.
No, I mean, we saw what happened, after we saw what happened down in Lower Mills, we're like, yeah, I mean, we were like, yeah, this will work for us. I mean, it's great. And I understand this is going to go on around the rest of the town as well. But to your point, Cheryl, I think a lot of times developers need, and what is actual is, I'll take 440, for example. They had to have 6 floors. Couldn't do it. Can't do it. It's not, we need the elevators, the car elevators. Can't do it without it. It's impossible. If we're going to walk away, we can't do it. Until they didn't get the support from the town. Then magic. They could do his floors shorter, So if we're going to go with economic feasibility, these developers have to open their books. And, that's going to take on a new responsibility for you or another committee where you're going to have to get some sort of forensic accounting. And Sean could speak to this probably, where we have to understand, how much is greed, or how much profit do you want to make, and what's a reasonable amount of profit do you want to make? And they're always going to ask for more, and they're always going to say it's impossible to do. This is just it's a cat and mouse kind of thing. So that's why you go to 24 meetings.
But Andy, you realize that site plan approval at 3 stories, it's unallowed. So what you do is you just shape the project, but what they're allowed when you do site plan approval is that amount. What they can fit is another matter, but what's allowed it doesn't go through that special permit process. It goes,
right.
It goes through the site plan approval process. So it should be less bruising. And if the economics don't work, it's not about opening their books. It's going to be that they don't come to the table. So, we'll find out, as Josh said,
Yeah.
after it's passed, zoning's passed, and if people can make the numbers work, they'll bring projects here, and if they can't, they won't.
But I think we just don't know until it happens, right? I mean, the new energy bill, stretched energy code that we just passed increased the cost of building anything in Milton too, right? So that's a factor, but whether or not, and I appreciate wanting to know what the developers are thinking, and I think we make it easier for them to have a conversation with the town if we can. Again, I'm not setting policy, obviously, but I know it takes a long time to get through anything in Milton, and it wouldn't behoove a developer to share necessarily their entire on a public forum, their financial statements. That wouldn't work. So if we give them an easy way to do things, and we make East Milton an attractive place to build with the overlay district that you guys are working on, I think we can do it without overburdening them.
I just want to answer, Jim, at least back when the Falcone proposal was going through a rigorous process that ended up going 40B, there was a request to start an overlay district, which planning board started with the ULI technical assistance panel, and then it went to the Barrett work, and that was during COVID, so it took a bit. And then we went into this process. So it's been a continuum from one thing, from that initial request. So it's always been about a request to get the zoning in place to make it less bruising to have to negotiate each project. That's what I understood, and that's why I've advocated for continuing with spending, the fees and pursuing the grants and so forth to continue the work. It takes time, and as you know.
Great, so
One thing though, but one of the things that you just said is we don't understand the economics of 3 stories, and we're not sure what will work for a developer. Will 3 stories work? Seems to me that's an important question to answer, because that's what we're going to set this for, approving the law and then seeing what happens. I don't know.
I mentioned, basically, you mentioned Milton Village. What we did there was we solicited feedback from a couple of developers who looked at the zoning and did a test parcel. Like if I bought this parcel, here's what I could do with it. Would it make sense? Could I finance it? Would the numbers work for it? And the feedback we got at that was like it would work for like a local developer, which is fine because it's small lots. But it was right at the threshold of what made sense when we passed that zoning. So, here it could be the same thing. But you have to have a draft. You got to kind of get to a draft of what you're proposing before they can respond to it and test it. That's why I was suggesting that Josh go through what his recommendations might be, and then that gets further vetted. I understand your point about wanting to get more survey feedback, but maybe you want to see what he's suggesting, and then decide whether it's more survey feedback or a draft that gets taken door to door.
Yeah, but I just thought I heard early on that we wanted to go on getting more feedback because we only had 7.
Wow, it's
and I think
better.
we can do that. I think we can move this forward
Okay,
and
sorry.
keep the project, keep this.
One half of the last second though is I'm not a big fan of having the developers tell us what works and what doesn't. I don't know how we can get around that, but I just would rather a different method of doing it.
So maybe a suggestion could be is.
We have a developer on the board.
So we do, and right now, we have the boundary, we have some heights. What I might suggest is maybe where Josh was suggesting 4 stories and 3 stories, we make those the 4-story parcels 3-story parcels, and the 3-story parcels 2-story parcels. That's not yet discussing whether it should be what should be special permit. I do think there should be, for some taller buildings, I would like to see site plan approval for 2, special permit for 3 stories, but I would leave that up to the board. But maybe that's just the way we move forward with regarding the height that I think we're feeling. And while
Mary,
we hear from,
we've got one participant. It sounded like you might be trying to wrap up. We have one participant on Zoom with their hand up. I don't know if you want to.
Yes. we can, thank you all.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I didn't know where we're going. Jim
And then we'll
Coyle.
let Josh speak too to all this.
Yeah, if you can give us your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, hi, Jim Coyle on 21 Button Street, East Milton.
Welcome.
I'm going to, it's good to be back. I was busy talking to my grandchildren on FaceTime, so I missed part of what was going on here. But the public safety is really a big concern to me, you know, and I think it's glossed over too easily. The demographics in East Milton in the time I've been here has changed a lot. We have a lot of young families just starting out, plenty of toddlers, and looking at that with the cut-through traffic increase, which has been tremendous. I mean, it's just more and more. I see parents racing out in the street to collect their toddler, you know, and when they have more than one, it becomes nearly impossible. And that's the reality right now. I don't know if the town has any demographics on East Milton, the age ranges, how many young people are there. Maybe the school system has something like that. But I think sometimes it even becomes, there's so much around a school bus time, the afternoons there. I love to walk the neighborhood, get some exercise out there. Sometimes the traffic is fighting with each other on Washington Street, on Brackett and other ones, then they just zoom around through there, but they want to get off of Adams or get off of Beale Street or something like that. It's like, becomes even almost unsafe to walk at times for the people that like to walk. And that needs to be a consideration there. I mean, the parking and getting any new projects need to get the off of the streets completely, 100%. The developer that did 440B, it was a bit ahead, but they did a similar project on Willard Street in Quincy, and not very far from East Milton. And they got about the same number of units on, but they had a bigger parcel of land. I mean, the density of a project makes a big difference as to what's possible. And also, the fire department in Quincy imposed on them setback. They wanted the bigger setback, and there's a drive-through for fire trucks only in front of the building. And this is a 4-story with parking, I believe, some at each, some's behind building, probably double-sized the parcel that the 440 project is going forward with. Same number of units, double the property, and double the size of the property, the one in Quincy now. So, you know, we need to look at our neighbors around here, other towns. Milton's not the only place facing that problem. I mean, I've done projects in Quincy townhouses, other projects in Chelsea, where we had to work, and getting the input from the fire department first on public safety is a big deal. In Chelsea, it's required. They have almost a veto authority on projects on site plan approval, submitting the traffic flow for fire trucks and emergency vehicles. That's first. The profitability of the sector, if they can't meet the public safety requirements, there should be no project. And our neighboring towns, they do that. They really enforce it very well. I think Milton is kind of lacking in that regard. I saw that very easily on the 40B project there. I couldn't get straight answers out of anybody in that project. And I asked questions at a lot of meetings. And so public safety, keep in mind the young children, the impact, you know, loss of one life or injuries is way up. It's up. That's the most important thing. People's lives here. And look what we had a few years ago. We had a young woman was trying to walk across the street from Starbucks to the other side of the street there, got hit by a bus. Tragic. That kind of thing has to be, the emphasis here is backwards. Public safety needs to be first, and whatever's left over can be built on.
Thank you.
And so I know that's I just want to throw that in there, so.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate your joining us tonight. Okay.
So maybe we need to give our fire chief the comfort level to take a stance. My understanding is, he's kind of out on a limb on his own. He's not protected by the union. He gets hired and fired by, I think, the town administrator or the selectman. And so maybe he needs to be reassured that, publicly reassured that we need him to look out for the residents. We've heard, through a few different projects that, and through the 40Bs, because I listened to them, that, he didn't take a strong stance. And that was my frustration with him. I think on the Amore Road, his letter said, in a perfect world, this would work. But as you know, we're not in a perfect world. And it was still approved that. And to me, if I lived in that development, I wouldn't have comfort that the fire department would come and rescue me or help a family member. So I feel like maybe we need to, talk to the fire chief and tell him we want him to take a more positive stand on public safety, and he shouldn't be worried about, keeping his job.
So can I just do
Maggie,
a time check?
Yes, Tim.
So are you insinuating that the fire chief in his review of these projects is not acting in the best interest of the safety of the residents of Milton? I just want to make sure we're super clear on that.
No, I think that the firemen of the town of Milton do a super job in keeping all of us safe. I am so grateful to the firemen because they have come to my family's aid so many times. But sometimes I'm concerned that their motto is they can make anything work. They will show up in any situation because that's what they do. They get a call and they show up and they will make it work. So we should help them make their jobs easier.
I guess we're talking about zoning for East Milton Square, and I feel as if that is a whole different topic. And I also want to do a time check. There's other items on the agenda.
I was going to say, and I want Josh to be able to.
Yeah, and we have Josh and Util waiting. So I just want to make sure we're trying to be efficient with our discussion too.
Good. All right. So, Josh, next steps and moving forward, what would be your recommendation? Is it another forum that we'll be holding, or?
He had some recommendations he hasn't covered.
Yeah, if you want to get to your recommendations, that would be.
Yeah, I think there's a few practical considerations. I agree with everything that was said about additional community engagement. I think that would be valuable for the town and for this process. I'm happy to reopen the survey that was previously hosted and provide the links and QR codes, et cetera, so that the town can help us to promote that again and get additional feedback. In terms of recommendations, we do have, as I mentioned, some practical considerations that the grant that this work is funded through, does the grant source would like to see a deliverable from this process, which is the draft zoning by the end of June. And so that, I just say that, not to say that this needs to rush the process to that point, but that we will prepare and have prepared draft zoning language so that it can be shared as a deliverable for that purpose. But then, of course, this process will continue and can be adjusted based upon additional feedback that's gathered. The recommendations, which I think even, and I won't take the time to address all of the comments that were made, many of them good, some of them I disagree with professionally. But what I will say is that the center point and core of the recommendations, I think, is well-founded, well-supported, has been discussed for many years now. And I do think that that is the 3 stories by right with site plan review. I think my own opinion is that even with additional community feedback that may be gathered, that we will only further fortify that as a core recommendation. I hear everyone about the 4 stories. I'm 100% fine in not going there. And it sounded even more convincing this evening in terms of the remarks. I think that we do have suggestions around the parking and how to make that work. I do think, just to circle back to sharing parking, it is not necessarily the way it was described in the comments, but more that property owners and their users and tenants would come to agreements about the peak hours of use for certain uses or the adjacent properties parking, which may be underutilized at certain hours, and propose as a part of their approval process with the planning board, written agreements about when certain parking spaces could be used for what uses, and that might help the parking in the square to function more efficiently and also allow for a project to be developed feasibly in terms of what can fit on the property. So that is all written out in terms of draft zoning language. We have, as I mentioned, prepared draft zoning language which we can share with the board, which might be a very useful instrument to think about some of the further details that are required. We have prepared that draft based upon the outline and format of Milton Village's zoning language and section, which was recently approved in the town. And so what I might suggest is that we will circulate that information to the town, to the planning board through Tim. And then we have also, just as maybe as I started touching on practical matters, and I'll return to practical matters, we have extended our contract with the town, which was set to expire on June 5th through November 30th. So we do have time to continue both with the community engagement and the refinement of the zoning. We also planned to use the summer months to work on the design guidelines, which are a part of our scope for this process as well, which will further, we hope, provide further confirmation and comfort for the community and for the town that the results of this work will be something that everyone would like to see. That we've reviewed in detail, again, the design guidelines, which were prepared by Dodson Flinker for the Milton Village district, and think that we can follow a similar outline and content approach from that process, since it's something that is already established within the town and within the zoning and is used by the planning board. So that would be our approach and proposal. We should discuss how best to support the planning board in terms of returning to the community beyond a reinvigorated survey and outreach effort. That may take the form of a forum. I know that the summer months, we always get question marks about in terms of how many people are available and how likely they are to attend. We could also, I'm not sure when the board wants to actually bring this potentially to a town meeting, but could contemplate that as a public hearing, which would be a part of the warrant process for a town meeting. Those are options which we can consider, but that we don't have that's all to say we don't have a firm plan for another community forum at this point, and rely more on the expanded outreach and renewed survey efforts that were discussed at this meeting. With that, I will see how all of that lands with the board.
I think that sounds good. I think that, keeping us on schedule while we're doing the outreach, and actually it may be more beneficial, and maybe that's why some people didn't fill out the survey. Sometimes people like to have more of a concrete idea and visualization of what is actually being proposed. And so I think moving forward with some of the zoning language, sending us that draft, and then we can review that. And, I wouldn't want to wait too long. So July, probably.
Well,
June, I'm sorry, at the end of June,
if Josh's grant funding requires to submit language in June, then we'll receive it in June. Right? So what we do with it in June, I guess, is the next question. I think he said he's happy to open the survey back up, but he doesn't have in his scope of work another forum. So if we felt we needed another forum, we'd have to look at amending his contract and having the source of funds to do that if we felt that that was necessary. But it sounds like first, maybe there's community-led outreach, and we can see where that leads and then decide whether we need that additional forum. Because we're going to have, as he said, we have to hold public hearing on it anyway. The design guidelines will be helpful for people to visualize, and those will be being worked on in the summer. As far as when it would go to a town meeting, I think it kind of depends on when people feel it's ready. So I don't know if it would be ready for a fall town meeting or a spring town meeting. But in the past, large zoning articles have been tried to be done in the fall because there's a lot with budgets in the spring. But I think that what Josh outlined makes sense. And some of it we sort of have to accept.
Yep, I agree. Any other, Sean or anyone else from board, any other comments?
Well, I was just going to ask.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say, can we just leave the survey up even though it's not the greatest? Just try to get more than 71 people?
Put it back up.
There's no reason to take
Josh
it down,
was saying
I think.
he can put it back up.
Okay, so that will be done?
Yep.
Okay, I'm good. Other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, we'll just reopen the survey that was previously prepared and then provide the distribution links and QR codes again to Tim, who can get it out to the folks who are on the meeting tonight.
Good. And is there any limit on how long we're going to leave it open? I mean, can it just stay open until we decide to take it down?
Yep.
Okay, good.
We just let it run.
Good.
No, Meredith, just one comment. I think everybody's comments are important tonight. Everyone's in. Mr. Coyle's comments on safety, the comments by Andy, John, and Warren in terms of the height desired by the people in the community, everything Josh has told us. But the reality of it is, East Milton is what East Milton is because it was possible for people to invest in East Milton and create amenities in East Milton that improved our community. I think there's an awful lot of people in Milton that benefit from the amenities that are there. And I remember as a kid in the '60s going into the buying penny candy in the 5 and dime store, and I don't think anybody really envisioned Abbey Park 25 or 30 years ago. So I do feel whatever we do, we obviously have to respond to the concerns of the residents of East Milton, but I feel like we have to make it possible for East Milton to continue to evolve. And it will only evolve if there's a return on investment that's possible. That's the only way it happens. The folks that went down and invested in restaurants down there, they did it because it was possible for them to create a viable business. So whatever we do, if we don't make it possible for there to be a return on investment, it'll never change. It just won't change. And so the Josh's challenge is And as a planner, you're always trying to find balance. The balance between moving something forward and creating opportunities for development, but not creating harm that would make it, dissatisfying to so many of the interests that were spoken of tonight. So as we move forward, that's the balance we're trying to find. It's sometimes it does feel like, capturing lightning in a bottle, which is nearly impossible. And we've had so many conversations, and Cheryl's told us how many years she's listened to this, and it goes back for a very long time listening to this topic of conversation. I'm hopeful that we can get there, but we do have to make it possible. If we make it impossible for investment to succeed, it just won't happen, and it'll be as it is for as long as we all for years. It just won't change.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so Josh, you'll send that draft out to us. We'll review that, and then Tim can follow up with you on next meeting dates, if that's.
That sounds great, and I'll reopen the survey, and I'll make some changes to our draft, so I'll send it next week because I will remove the provisions that we included about 4-story.
Okay.
I think that makes sense after tonight.
That sounds good.
Meredith, how do we make some of the other ideas to get the survey more widely responded to happen? John talked about door to door. We talked about posting in the businesses in East Milton Square. Can we make any of that happen?
Well, we can talk to Tim. I think, certainly social media, reaching out to the East Milton Neighborhood Association, just saying, please complete the survey. I don't know how many members are with the East Milton Neighborhood Association?
I think we have, excess of 500 members. So, we could get it out to them, but I think going into the businesses, and I know most of the businesses here in the square, and they would all post.
Okay.
I could say that.
Maybe the Chamber of Commerce, we could reach out to them and
I'll just go directly to the,
okay.
Why make a loop? We'll just go right to the, I'm sorry. Did you pick me up?
From all the way back then, no?
Yeah.
So.
Julie, do you want to write something?
No, I was just saying we could go directly to the business owners. I know all the business owners. They're really invested in the community. They're very worried about what's happening. They know traffic is going to get exponentially worse. So they wanted to be part of this as much as possible. And I always thought it would be a good idea, even if those business owners don't live in Milton, that they have some sort of say because, without Jen the barber, I'd be lost. So.
Okay. One last comment, and that we do have to.
I think
one second. I just think in answer to that, we in East Milton need to take an active role. I think so.
And Tim, yes, final comment before we move on.
Yeah, Meredith, I think once that survey is back up, we can get a flyer together with the QR code and some information. Print those out. We'll get those into Andy's hands and to John's hands. If they've got relationships with the business owners, we want to take advantage of that if they want to help us, which we obviously would be very grateful for. I'm actually going to the next Chamber of Commerce meeting, so this will be part of my update. So we'll have information for all those folks as well. So, I'm very appreciative of folks coming out and wanting to, use their networks and spread the word. And so we will, we'll take you up on that for sure. So thank you for that.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate that. And now we can move to the discussion of the MBTA zoning. Just real briefly, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but the survey that went out, there were a few questions on which there were a couple of residents that found some of the questions confusing. Tim, is that something, do you want to just work on maybe tweaking some of those few questions and maybe sending it out to us, or what would be the best way? We could look at it right now, but we're already getting late.
I think on the so there's good news and there's bad news, and I think and they're both kind of the same news, and that is, let me just bring this up. Can you see that? So we've already gotten 403 response. We talked about 71 is not a lot in East Milton. Maybe 403 isn't a lot in the whole town, but this survey has only been up for 3.5 days.
Yeah.
So there's been a real flood of responses. People are interested in taking this survey. Even the sort of very sort of basic town website, social media, word of mouth. That's how we've gotten these responses. So that's great. And we'll continue to sort of hype this up and get that out there and make sure that people are aware and have the link. But that also means that, we have 403 people that have taken, an average of 12 and a half minutes out of their day, to fill out this survey. And so, we've gotten, a good deal of feedback on some of the questions. Maybe, some of the questions aren't 100% clear. Maybe some of the questions could yield contradictory information. Some of the questions may be seen as maybe leading to a certain answer, which I think I understand and appreciate. I don't think that making wholesale response or changes to the survey at this point is advisable, because there have been so many responses already. And so I think to the extent that, we can make maybe some minor tweaks to add to the clarity, I think we can maybe try to do that. I think the way to approach this survey and to address some of the feedback, which again, I think is good feedback. And we definitely appreciate people, being engaged and wanting to help us, make things as clear as possible, is to use that feedback, in conjunction with the results of the survey that we get to kind of hone in on issues that we need further information and clarity on. Because I think the way the board needs to think about this is, what are we trying to get out of this survey? What are the results from these 403 responses? What do we want to know? And how are we going to use it? Asking questions for the sake of asking questions isn't going to get you very far. And I think, 403 responses is a lot, but it's not, the most, statistically significant sample size in the town of Milton. So I think you need to sort of use this less as, I'll give you an example. We'll scroll all the way down to one of these questions, and it's, zoning should maximize the unit capacity within a half mile of trolley and commuter rail stations. We've got 29% strongly agree, 30.3% agree. That borders on majority support for that position. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, the board's going to use that and say, like, all right, well, half mile of transit wins, and that's where we're going to put our zoning districts, because I don't think that's how you should do your work. But these are data points. And to the extent that there are questions that come in really close, or questions that people have identified as maybe unclear, or questions that maybe are yielding results that are unexpected, I think approaching that from a standpoint of, all right, what is the next question that we ask to clarify this information, to tease out more information that will be more helpful for us. We had used the survey last year as a kind of rolling, iterative data collection tool. So, at the end of the day, the final results of the survey, were maybe a little bit of a muddle, but on a rolling basis, addressing specific questions that we were continuing to update, iterate upon, helped us kind of shape, the language that we were putting together. I think there can be a little bit more discipline about that, a little bit more structure, but I think, we've had calls to kind of pull the survey down and, hire a professional survey designer. If the board wants to do that, you can do that. But I think ultimately, unless we're going with hiring a firm that does public policy polling, you're never going to get something that is statistically significant at a sort of level of confidence where you can say, okay, this is a predominant view that we should go along with. So you have to kind of think more critically and deliberately about, these are good data points. We've got 403 opinions here. How do we use that? How do we use these results to help us learn more? So, that's kind of where we are right now. If you want to walk through some of these results, happy to do it. But also I can put together some, on a periodic basis, we can kind of pull these charts out and distribute them if you want to kind of do it offline.
So Tim, I'm sorry, can I ask
yeah.
a couple questions? One of the concerns that's been raised too is, can people take the survey more than once, which the answer seems to be yes. So is there a way to track whether people have taken the survey more than once?
There should be. I'd have to talk to our RT folks about this particular polling product, but we'll definitely take a look in the back end and see if that's the case. I mean, here and again, my advice to you as a board is if the stakes of this survey are such that people feel they need to stuff the ballot box, that's bad. And so I think sort of having that discussion and being clear about look, please don't do that, first of all. Second of all, this is how we're using this information. And if you sort of try to game the system, it's not helpful to the board, it's not helpful to the residents, if you're getting kind of skewed data, for that reason. But we'll double check and take a look and see if we can kind of, see how many times people have voted. If it's possible, we'll report back.
And then I was thinking, could we add a question which is just where somebody can type something in? It's not really a question, it's a comment section where they could give us feedback on the questions. Like they could, if they're not familiar with some of this terminology, just say, I really didn't understand question 16 or whatever question it is. And can you put like a brief explanation of this somewhere on the website so that if I want to learn more about this question before I answer it, there's information available to me.
Yeah, I think that's a fine idea, and we can certainly do that.
And that way we can kind of tease out which questions are the most problematic for folks to understand, or just feel like it's unclear, like how we're going to use. Like, a lot of people are questioning how we want to use some of it, and I think it's valid. So we can talk about that maybe at an upcoming meeting.
Would we want to know how they voted on the referendum? Would that be helpful?
No, I just think that's divisive.
Yeah, I don't.
There's enough divisiveness already.
Just so it would sort of let us know if more yes voters are taking the survey, or if there are more no voters.
I agree. I don't think.
One thing that I'd like to do is get people on as common a platform or starting point as possible. I feel as if there's a lot of information that, based on my knowledge, of our knowledge of having had so many meetings about it, that there was misunderstanding about or inaccuracies about, and because people just came to it late and they didn't necessarily have time to get caught up, and there's so many different documents on the website and so many recordings you could watch. It's overwhelming for people. So if
let's start working on it, and let's go through the criteria.
But I just want
it's
people.
Almost 9 o'clock, and we're going to be out of here at 10. So
one last thing for people who are listening, though, is to think about these questions. Is how we're going to use them, as Tim said. And I'd like to say that one of my ways of thinking about this is to see how far apart people are on their understanding. And so if they find the questions that they don't know how to answer, to me that means there's a lack of understanding about something, and we need an education campaign on that.
Right. Agreed.
Quick question, Tim. When this gets... Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim. You first.
Okay. All right, I just have a quickie.
No, that's all right. You first, please.
All right, thank you. I just have a quickie. Tim, when this is out there on Facebook, is there a live link to the survey?
Nope, you're muted.
Jen, can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Is there a what link?
A live link. So like if you see it on Facebook and you click on it, you go right to the survey and your data gets recorded. Because I've been told by people that that's not
right
the case.
There's a link right to the survey, yeah.
All right.
Well,
so if I see it on, Milton Neighbors,
what you're getting.
So if I see it on everything Milton and I click on it, does it pop up and would the survey, would my data that I input be recorded? Or would I have to go to the town website? I guess that's called a live link, and I might not have the terminology right.
Yeah, no, here, let me share my screen again, and just kind of show you.
It depends on how somebody posts it. They post a picture of it.
Just for everybody.
Maybe that's where there was a problem.
So Jim, if your survey does not look like this, Milton MBTA Community Survey with the green-blue background and the question, if it's anything besides this, that is not our survey. Yeah, if you're seeing anything on Facebook where it's like a poll within a Facebook post, or it's, living on like the Milton Neighbors or the Milton Scene like website, that is not our survey. So what we have done is, we've given, a little bit of information like, hey, take the survey, here's a link, it'll go here. The language on the town website, on the Facebook, on the Twitter is all relatively similar. And it all links to this Microsoft Forms page right here.
All right, so it does get you there. Okay, good enough. Great, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Tim, my question is real simple. We have 403 that responded, and I'm aware of at least 3 that have commented on suggesting changes to it. How many have you had that have responded and suggested changes?
I'd say, we've maybe gotten, whether via email or just, hearing from folks that have, maybe half a dozen to 10, folks that have said, hey, this question seems unclear. A lot of the feedback is relatively consistent. So I think, survey's only been up for 4 days. I think, there's other work for the board to do. I think we can start to, once the board feels like we need some more and different information, we can kind of bring that feedback into the conversation, and think about, how to either revise new questions or kind of ask follow-up questions. But it was all relatively consistent. And I think, I'll just kind of chime in with a couple cents here on this. Well, one of the tough things about a survey, and it looks like I'm frozen, sorry. One of the tough things about a survey on a topic like this is, for as much as we've been talking about MBTA community zoning and, we're all kind of experts on it, not everybody is. And the question itself needs to have a certain amount of information so that people know what the question's even about. And then you start to get, well, this is leading you in a different direction or whatever, or this isn't clear because I don't quite understand these concepts. So it's tough, but it is good feedback. And, I think we should definitely use it.
Great, thank you. All right, what I would propose is that we just give an overview of where all the districts were when we last were working on this, and what was last presented to the town meeting.
Can I just ask a question? Just
sure.
Because we have members from UTIL here, so I was wondering if
are they? Yeah.
If we wanted to, if you were planning to have them kind of lead the kind of discussion, or were we going to wait? I just want to, I set an expectation for when we're going to hear from them for both their purpose and for anybody who's watching's purpose.
So I was going to have, I'm glad that UTIL is with us because we may have some questions as we go through this. I was going to have Tim walk through and introduce, and I was going to just propose that we start with the Elliott Street corridor as a first district. Highlight, maybe show the map to the residents if we pull that up in the screen, and then we walk through lot size, how the height of the buildings, coverage of the lot area, sort of the details of that, and maybe we keep that up, and then we walk through our scorecard, and I would say we have a rank of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. the best or highest, 1 being the least or lowest, 3, 2, 4. And then we go through, and I can read through all of the list of the criteria for each district and try to hammer out and see by district where we are on the criteria. And Tim, I don't know if you want to we can each fill out this individually on our own, or as we go through it, we can share the information publicly and say why we feel what we do about this, whether the height is appropriate, similar to other, for example, allowed height is comparable to existing in the district, how we feel about that, and sort of get consensus on how we feel about each of these districts and walk through that.
I'm wondering if, and I'm not opposed to that as a step to do. Just wondering again about UTIL's time and whether we have them participate before we go through all of that, because I'm not sure that we'll need their feedback on each of these criteria. I'm kind of curious about if we can. If we're
you would
planning
like UTIL to go through and highlight each of the districts and go through and
well,
overview
just kind of like if they did a high level review of each of the districts and then we jumped into more of the detail. I think the high level would be good for people who are watching or who will watch the tape and kind of want to have a primer on, okay, what was in those districts and kind of a little bit how we arrived at it. And UTIL was the one that really led all of that work, with Tim. And so if they jointly they do that, and then we go into the detail.
That would be fine. Tim, is that okay with you to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, first we'll introduce the team. If you want to say hello and welcome to UTIL. Welcome back, I should say.
Sure, happy to. It's nice to see you all again. So as you all know, I'm Zoe Miller, project manager for the consultant team for the UTIL team. And Matthew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Matthew Littell, Principal UTIL. Nice to see you all again. And I'm looking forward to embarking on the next chapter. And I don't know if JT is online, but we're also joined by another colleague, JT Keller.
I apologize. I forgot about JT. I'll never do it again. He should be joining us as a panelist in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, so just while he's joining us, JT will be supporting me and Matthew to make sure that we're able to iterate on kind of compliance model issues as they arise. He's been doing this work for other communities and is ready to kind of jump in and help out here in Milton.
Hey everyone, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited to get involved.
Cool.
Welcome, JT.
Awesome. So give me just a moment to pull up the latest here. I just want to make sure that I'm showing the right thing.
Iterations.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to just I'm going to share a map of it, and I think I can flash up the kind of summary table that we had at the very end of the process at the end of 2023. And I think the core of kind of what I hope are going to cover over the course of the next series of meetings that we have together is kind of understanding a little bit about where we should be focusing for revisions. And I know that there's also an interest in understanding what it would look like to comply with a version of the regulations that would consider Milton as a adjacent community. So that's something that we obviously did not consider since it's not the current status that you have with the state, but we're aware of that request. Okay, so this is kind of zoomed out citywide, so you can see that the districts are focused along the Mattapan Trolley transit area, and then there's a few districts that are located kind of along the highway, both East Milton and Granite Ave here. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see them a little bit better. So you can see here that we have kind of a string of districts that each have different characteristics, different parameters. And the ones that have the hatch here are the mandatory mixed use districts. So those are districts where you would not be able to build unless you were delivering ground floor commercial, which is really important to the vitality in those districts. So that's Milton Station East in the yellow hatch and Milton Station West in the green hatch. The remainder of these are residential only districts, or in some cases, I believe they allow mixed use, but it's possible to build residential only. And I think other than that, I think there was a lot of debate as we kind of got to the end of the process last time around about Granite Ave districts, sub-districts in particular. Granite Ave North being one that's within the transit area for the most part, and Granite Ave South being the larger site that is outside of the transit area. So I think the sort of the character of each of these districts is largely designed to match the existing patterns wherever possible, and then where we're looking at increased densities, being mindful of those existing patterns and setbacks and all of that. I don't know, Matthew, if you want to add anything to that before I flash up the table of parameters.
No, I think you captured it very well. Again, trying to understand how incremental change would be acceptable and how to sort of meet those requirements in each of these contexts. And again, obviously, probably Granite Ave parcels represented potentially the most dramatic change because obviously they're very large parcels with nothing on them right now, right? Which is a different scenario than more of the smaller infill things that we imagined elsewhere.
Yeah, and I guess I'd also just add for context for folks, so the East Milton Square planning work had begun at the time of, when we were putting this together the last time around, but obviously it was not at a point where there was really much in the way of findings or recommendations. I think that's another, piece of the puzzle that's evolved since we last spoke. It doesn't necessarily mean that it'll impact this proposal or this zoning as an overlay, but it's something that we now have kind of new information to consider as we look at kind of fine tuning these all in response to your feedback and what you've heard from the public in the meantime. So just to give a sort of an overwhelming numbers summary here. There's quite a bit in devil's in the details for all of these, but I think just to highlight kind of at a big picture level, the density here, which is, again, not a projection of what will happen, but is a sort of estimate that's used by the state to kind of evenly judge all of the communities that are working on this right now. You can kind of see that there's, in effect, a tiering here, or kind of a set of districts that are delivering higher densities and a set that are more moderate densities. So Granite Ave North is the highest density site. So that's that small site that's kind of hugging the highway and the border with Boston on the east side of town. Granite Ave South, just below it, comes in at the next highest density. And then Mattapan Station and Milton Station Bridge, which is kind of the single kind of parcel that connects between the two different Milton Station mandatory mixed use districts. That comes in a little bit lower. And then we kind of do a big step down as we go into the districts that are more embedded in existing residential neighborhoods, where there's a lot of built out, patterns of residential development in those areas. So East Milton Square is a case of that, so that this density is recognizing the fact that that is also a focus for future kind of residential development to complement the commercial uses there. Then we see the Blue Hills Parkway corridor at a slightly higher density than the remaining ones, largely to reflect the small parcel fabric that's present in that part of town, and also the sort of lining that corridor. And then we see the kind of Elliott Street corridor, which in this summary is broken out into three tiers. Functionally, that would show up as a single zoning kind of overlay subdistrict for folks that are interacting with the zoning. But for the purposes of modeling, we had to break it out into these 3 separate ones that each have specific rule sets that are associated with different parcel sizes. So the smallest minimum lot size would be 7,500, and then a 10,000 square foot and above parcels, and then 15,000 square feet and above parcels. So those have different rule sets to account for the different norms that exist for those different parcels within those parts of town currently. And I think that that's probably where we should stop, because I know that these numbers can get kind of mind-numbing when you go through too many. So I would kind of stick with that kind of big picture. And the only things I would mention as we think about beginning to tweak these or find them is that it's tempting to kind of treat these as a series of kind of separate blocks and just you can kind of swap them out. But in fact, there's a very fine balance between all of them. And so as we think about making those tweaks, we have to be mindful in particular of the overall density that we have and also of the relationship between mandatory mixed use districts and other districts that allow residential only. That's the kind of where we saw some of the most sensitivity before when we make tweaks in one district, and then we find that we actually have to make adjustments in another one in order to respond to that skew and the balance that we had established. So I think I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to, if there's any slide that you want me to leave up, I can stay on that. Otherwise I can stop sharing to allow you to kind of proceed as you had in mind.
Great, so that's great.
Don't stop sharing. I'm sorry.
I think the map is good.
Yeah, leave that up, please.
Yeah, if you can leave that screen up, I think that's really helpful that we can refer back as we're walking through these various districts.
Great, can do.
Okay. Any other questions before we sort of?
Just my net new. I'm not seeing a net new column. Am I missing it?
We don't have it on this summary, and I would say overall, my advice is not to put too much credence in that because it's a little bit comparing apples to oranges. And the quality of the data on existing units is not great. That's true in just about every community in the US. We have kind of spotty data on existing units because people change things informally and don't report that to the government always. So we did do some analysis on that at one point, in particular for the Elliott Street corridor because of the sensitivity there. But again, it's big caveats there about whether the data that we're comparing to is really reliable data.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem for me because a lot of my decision making is based on net new in different areas and how, I guess, equitable that is throughout town.
So one thing, Jim, is I've taken a look at the Elliott Street based on the parcel data that came out of the compliance model in the Excel spreadsheet. And I did want to run through that at some point and with Zoe and Util's team just to see if it seems to be like what she would consider reliable data, because then I do think it's important for the understanding of net new. It's because there was so Zoe and others and Util, there was a lot of discussion, during votes leading up to the town meeting and then the referendum about sort of what was perceived as like unfair burden for net new. So while it might be harder to be reliable data, it's really important data for the public to understand.
Understood.
Yeah,
I think it's really the precision that I would advise against. So I think it's like in broad strokes, it's a totally valid criteria. I just wouldn't fixate on like a difference of 10 one way or another. That's something that the data is not that precise to be making that comparison. But when we're talking about differences of, there's, we're looking at net new of 500 in this place and 10 in this place. Like that's an order of magnitude difference that we can talk about. I just don't want to get bogged down in the very precise comparisons because I don't think they're valid.
Right, take it. Thank you.
Cool.
All right.
So does that mean we would include it knowing that it's got a swing, or would there be a net new column up there? Or?
I think we're going to need to include it.
Comment on Carol, for a minute, can I just comment on this? I mean, well, first, it's good to see you Teal friends back with us. So thank you for being with us tonight, and we look forward to working together to try to move this forward. But Zoe, I guess my feeling in Milton that there may be some data that maybe some changes have taken place, but I feel pretty good about Milton, our building department, and the fact that the data points are never going to be that far off. And we have to use them. I mean, the way you described it earlier, I was thinking I was living in a different community. But I think what you're suggesting is that what was maybe a single-family home has been modified to something else, and we don't have record of it, or what was 2 became 3, or something of that nature. I think that's a very, very rare instance in Milton.
So I think that's fair. I think what sometimes happens is that data doesn't get translated up to other levels of government too. So we're working with, in most cases, with state data sets for this kind of work. So if you have GIS data, so spatial data that's at the parcel level, we can make use of that and see what we can get. But what we have right now is we're working with state parcel data, which my guess is at minimum, it might not be inaccurate, but it is probably out of date because of that lag between, a local update to a regional update to a state update.
Tim, can you weigh in on this?
Sorry, Sean?
If Tim could weigh in on this.
Yeah, I think ultimately, again, I definitely appreciate what Zoe's saying, and I think that it's good advice to take into your evaluation of the net new, where the estimates of units are, and it's not just kind of informal changes to this or that, but every data set has kind of inconsistencies and margins of error. So I think we'll use the best numbers that we've got. And I think as long as, taking Zoe's advice, as long as you're not putting, super precise stock into, a difference of a handful of units here or there, using it to evaluate districts in a broader way, I think is the safest way to make sure that you're not kind of going down a path that, is not kind of the most rigorously, data driven. But I think having that number, people are concerned about it, they care about it, they want to see it, so it doesn't make sense to not have it. So just take it with that minor grain of salt, and I think we'll be fine.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the scorecard that's been developed sort of breaks it out into categories. Why don't we start with the Granite? We can start with Granite Avenue North, or do we want to start with other areas and leave sort of East Milton to a later point? We can go through it as in order. So I don't know if anyone has a preference.
So you wanted to run through the scorecard right now and assign for each one?
Yeah, or get a general consensus on where we're in agreement on.
So if we say Granite Ave North, what the allowed height of 6 stories is the existing building height.
Yep.
So now how we would score that would be, okay, if we're saying or allow height that's comparable to the existing, then this would score 5, right?
Exactly.
Because it's exactly what it is, right?
Right.
So then we go next. This one, it doesn't really apply, right? Because, so we would just put not applicable here for this one, right?
Allowed height is comparable to existing multifamily, correct.
So it doesn't really apply in that particular district, right? And then allowed building size is comparable to existing. I think we'd have to double check that with the FAR. Is the FAR, I think we did arrive at making it comparable. Is that right, Zoe? That 1.1 FAR was pretty comparable to the existing at Granite Ave North. Do you recall?
My memory's a little foggy on that, but I can certainly check that and get it back to you. I'll see if I can pull it up in my some other files from that time while you're talking.
No, I might have it here. It's 1.1.
The FAR? Yeah, so the existing building, I can look at, actually I did an FAR analysis of that before, but maybe what we should do is keep going and come back to the ones we don't have the immediate answer.
Great.
So yeah, I do recall, Cheryl, that being pretty directly informed by some of the analysis that you had done around FAR. That doesn't help in giving you a precise number, but I do recall that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, we were talking about sometimes you had to adjust it a little bit, not to reduce the zone capacity down, right? But we were trying to tailor it pretty closely to what was there. So, so I think that's right. But we should, if we want, we can double check it. So the typology, well, the existing typology, as an office building, in some ways this is a little one of those not applicable in some ways too.
I would agree.
And the open space at 40%, I'm going to call up, keep going, I'm going to call up the analysis I did here.
It's a 40% lot area.
Yeah. Again, I had done when I did that FAR calculation, I had also done the open space. So if you want to come back to that, I'm pretty sure that that's tailored also to be comparable.
District includes area with significant tree coverage.
There's not there.
Yeah.
So do we rank that as a 5 then, because there's not significant tree coverage?
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, then do not exceed the requirements of the statute and guidelines. The density per acre, so this is,
yeah, so, this one is, I think we're going to have to come, the density per acre.
I think this did exceed.
This exceeds it.
Yeah.
Because it's a trade-off to the ones that are lower, the Elliott Street corridor, right?
And it's based on the comparison of 15 units per acre. So this is 45 units per acre. So that would be a 5, in my mind.
The Granite Ave North one is the highest density. So this is the 60.6.
Oh, sorry, that was I was looking at.
Yeah, so we were looking at the units per acre at 45 units an acre. But can you?
Oh, I see what you mean. The units per acre cap, not the modeled unit density.
Okay, so can you explain the difference between those?
Yeah, that's always a bit of a sticking point. So what the model does is on the front end, it applies that 45 units per acre to the entire parcel area. And in most cases, the resulting density is the same or lower than that because of other parameters that are also constraining it. But in this case, and in other cases where you see this pattern of the model density exceeding the maximum units per acre cap that's set at the front end, that's because the model subtracts wetland area and other sensitive land that has development restrictions on it. And it gives you, essentially it gives you a density boost as a result of the way that calculation is run. So this is still not exceeding 45 units per acre of parcel area. But if you look instead at the number of units per developable acre of parcel area, that's where you get the 60.6. And that's what the state is judging you on, is that result, not the restriction that you put on the front end. Does that help? This one tends to not really stick, this explanation.
Yeah. Well, it helps when you explain it, but when we come back to it, probably.
I'll be ready to say it again. Yeah. Don't worry.
Okay. I did find the work that I had done before. The existing office building, I had it at having a building area of just under 92,000 and a lot area of 179,000. So an FAR of 0.5. And then its lot coverage is basically, if you do parking and building, it's like nearly all covered. So there's really not open space at all, like, you know, fractions of open space. So having the 40% open, you know, in the zoning, I think is an improvement over all this impervious here. So that, going back to that criteria, let's see.
Maintain that.
So we would say it's an improvement on, so maybe like a 5 on item 8.6. If it's an improvement over the existing, because there's zero, like close to 0% now, and you're going to 40% in this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we said the tree coverage. So what we have in terms of allowed building size is comparable. I guess you'd have to decide, is it, what we're allowing is larger square footage, but requiring more open space. So there's less parking, really.
You're basically getting a better site plan in exchange for a little bit more development area.
More building, right. So how would you rate that, if you're understanding how we're rating this now, Zoe? I mean, what would you say about that in terms of the trade-offs on the building size?
I mean, this is my opinion. This is something that people will differ on, but I think for most people, their primary experience of a site is based on the ground plane, the ground level, the first couple floors. And so I would say that the improvements in the site plan have an outsized impact over the size of the building, as long as the building is designed well. You know, so I think that would be my inclination, is to heavily weight the site plan parameters, so the open space metrics, the lot coverage metrics. But, you know, people have different reactions to those things. So the technical advice only goes so far on that topic.
Yeah.
I think the concern more would be keeping the height, not increasing the height at all. So
Yeah.
as long as that height is consistent, I think that's.
So what would you then, Meredith, suggest for a numerical rating on, I guess it's, let me see here, 8.3?
A 4, maybe.
Okay.
Because it's not exactly.
Is anybody else filling yours in?
Well, yeah.
I'd give it a 3. I'm not filling it in, but I would give it a 3.
So I feel like this site is the site that I think can have more density.
So you give it a 5?
You know, of all the sites, this, you know, is the one that I think we should. I don't want to say go to the maximum, but I think this is a site that maybe we all agree is kind of ripe for development, and it won't impact
the Granite Ave.
the Granite Ave neighborhood as much, or any neighborhood really.
So then it sounds like you would give it a 5. All right, I'm going to run through. Okay. I've got Granite Ave now filled in at allowed height is comparable to existing in district of 5. Mm-hmm. Allowed height is comparable to existing multifamily in parts of town, excluding 40B. I'm just putting that applicable necessarily because I feel like this site is really not applicable to that. 8.3, allowed building size is comparable to existing, a 5. Mm-hmm. 8.4, allowed building size is comparable to multifamily, again, not applicable. 8.5, allowed building typology is comparable to existing, not applicable. 8.6, required open space is comparable to existing, 5. 8.7, district includes area with significant tree coverage, a 5, because there isn't tree coverage here. So we all agree on those? Mm-hmm. Great. All right, so you were trying to go to the next one, I think, Meredith, on the.
You know what? I'm realizing that I'm missing some of the data
Oh.
points. No, that's all right. So
can
if
share.
you want to continue just reading off, just to
Okay.
make sure you have a few more than I have.
Okay.
I think I have an earlier copy.
An older version, okay. Then the next guiding principle was do not exceed the requirements. Actually, let me just go back. What we were just discussing, which we just finished on Granite Ave North, was preserve the physical character of the town. Now, the guiding principle was do not exceed the requirements in the statute and guidelines. I'll just point out that these guiding principles were what we used previously in developing these districts that we just talked about. All right, so the density per acre is what the minimum is in the statute and in the guidelines. The way we've talked about handling that is having it lower in some areas and higher in others. So this is one of the areas that we decided higher is appropriate. So I would say here, I would give it a 5 because we're trying to solve that sort of problem or that riddle, right?
I would agree.
Okay, and then B.2, unit capacity. So the same kind of thing. We're trying to get some capacity here because it's a redevelopment of a business use, right? So I would again give this a high rating. Does everyone agree with that, a 5?
Yes.
All right, and then B.3, the sub-district size, a minimum of 5 acres. Now we're a problem because this isn't 5 acres, right? So we have to give this, I'd say a 1, right? Because it doesn't meet it. That's always been our dilemma with the Granite.
I will say, just with that point, I wasn't involved in the nuances of as you were putting these together, but this was an instance where we did, and Tim, feel free to chime in on this. We did reach out to the state about this particular issue with the Granite Ave North and South because it's such a unique condition.
Combined.
And my recollection is that the answer we got is that in this case, they interpreted north and south to be contiguous with one another and therefore together counting towards that 5 acre.
Okay, so then we can put this up. I guess it's
Tim,
just
am I
the
getting that
question
right?
is if it can be standalone. So I would put it as a 3 then, because it can't really work standalone.
It cannot be on its own.
Right.
Yeah.
But then would have to shrink Granite Ave South, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So do you agree with a 3 because it can't be standalone?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The next guiding principle, disincentivize tear down, C.1. Existing land use is single family. That's populated already because it's either a yes or no. So this is a no. Land use is vacant. So if you wanted to give these instead of a no, you could give this a 5, right? Because there's no residential here. There's no single family here, right?
Displacing residential.
Right.
Right.
So land is vacant. That's not the
In
case.
terms of residential, right.
So C.2, disincentivize tear downs again. If this did get redeveloped, there's a potential that the office building would be, a tear down. But so I guess I would say the land isn't vacant. So you'd have to give it a 1. Or do you give it a 3?
Well, in terms of everything relates to single-family housing. So it's vacant of single-family housing.
True.
Or residential, yeah.
So then you'd give it a 5.
Or residential, yeah.
All right, so it gets a 5. Existing building value is high. What we were talking about with that is if the building value is high, it's not likely to get torn down. So in this case, the building value is probably high because it's a relatively new building that's occupied.
Although there's a high level of vacancies and they're losing tenants.
And office space is a challenge. That's why I think we thought this was actually a potential.
Maybe 3 on that.
A 3?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that as a 3. C.4, district has parcels and/or buildings of adequate size to allow additional units without demolition. I say this is really not applicable. Do you agree?
Did we skip over historical architectural value?
Isn't that down on the next one?
Oh, is
That's
that
enough.
not? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're in C.
I must be on an old one also.
Yes, see,
We're on the one that's CT draft one.
yeah, I would say not applicable.
CT draft, just CT draft. Okay, whatever, it's all good.
Oh, wait, let's see.
Should have had you printed, Julia.
Are you looking at the
Oh,
same
mine
thing?
could be a copy, that's why it's a one.
Did you say district parcels have adequate size to allow for additional units
Yes.
without demolition?
Yeah, I just thought that that was not as tailored to an office use, so I thought it was not applicable here.
Yeah. Or you could say 5 because
All right.
you wouldn't be demolishing.
You don't have
Household
to demolish,
units.
you can
I don't think
add.
you drop that building to the ground. I think you do the facade.
All right, so they do a 5?
Yeah.
Okay. The avoid rezoning historic districts and parcels with historic structures. So D.1. District does not include a National Register of Historic Places district. So
We'll
that's
say
a 5.
Yeah.
District does not include properties that are listed on the National Register of Historic
5.
Places. 5. District does not include a local historic district.
5.
5. Then zone larger non-residential parcels to prevent displacement and minimize impact. So this gets to some of the parcel sizes. And here, this parcel is in the 1 to 5 acre. So it would get a 5 there. And the total number of parcels in the district. So when you're looking at like the Elliott Street corridor, there's a lot of parcels. This one just has 1 parcel. So I don't know how we
I don't know that
rank
this,
that,
yeah.
but I
mean, the rank is 5.
Yeah. I
But
guess.
if you're going to be consistent, but I
Yeah.
understand why you put in the number of parcels, so.
Let's just leave that for
Yeah.
now, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. And then again, existing land use is non-residential. We could change that from yes to 5, right?
Yeah, I give that.
Okay. And then next, take advantage of existing multifamily housing. Well, this is really just not applicable here.
Yep, I would say.
I would just put that all the way down on these.
Yeah.
So we'll go, I'll populate that later. Site districts in transit and amenity-rich areas. So access to trolley within a half mile, so this gets a 5. Because north is within a half mile.
Yeah.
Is it a half mile? Is it a half mile walking?
It's really, this is more for the compliance with the half mile.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a direct, as the crow flies, linear buffer. So it doesn't take into account street network or anything like that. So in reality, it would probably be a little bit more than a half mile actually walking the streets, but the state isn't judging you on that. It's a little too complex for them to be doing for that number of communities. So it's just, it falls, the majority of the site is falling within that, and presumably any exit from like a residential building on this site would be within that buffer. I would doubt that would they be exiting on the small portion of the parcel that's not within the trans area.
All right, so then the next, we don't access to trolley within 1 mile, access to trolley greater than a mile, those don't apply. And then bus line doesn't apply. Access to bike path within a half mile is the Neponset Trail is within a half mile, so this would get a 5. Access to sidewalks, that's a problem for this site. So I believe there's some sidewalk next
One
to
side? I
one
think
side,
one
but not
side.
the other. So is this a 3? Access to.
I think in this case, the sidewalk might not be relevant on both sides of the street because it's such a wide street. So I think if the sidewalk is on the wrong side of the street, I would weight that against it. If the sidewalk is on the same side, I would count it.
One
favorably.
problem, Zoe, is getting like the highway, that section, I believe doesn't have a sidewalk. Is that right? Does anyone know for sure?
Even if it does, you're
Take a look at
going
Street
under
View.
an overpass and then you're crossing.
You've got those
like a
really
clover leaf.
wide
It's super dangerous.
on-ramps and off-ramps.
So there's a
3
sidewalk.
might be too high on that one.
There's a sidewalk on that side of Granite Ave to get you over the bridge, but not one to get you
To East Milton.
towards East Milton.
That's what I thought. Okay, so I think it a 3. School within a half mile, that's
I mean, but does 3 indicate or give the indication that it's relatively safe?
Well, you can walk to the trolley by sidewalk.
Okay, so
You
it's.
can't walk the other
amenities,
direction
yeah.
to the amenities.
Yeah, so maybe
walk
that
to the
should
bike
be,
So that
path
should
and
be
to
a
the
lower
park.
access to amenities.
so maybe it's a different line item, so it could be access to transit is 5,
All right, why don't,
or whatever, or access to bike path.
all right, so I'm just.
You know, the 3 is the mid-range in our grade, isn't it?
Yeah,
3's the middle, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all know what it's like to walk towards East Milton Square. You can't get across those on ramps and off ramps. I can't see it being 3.
Yeah.
In any case.
Yeah.
And if the only sidewalk that exists is probably 100 feet, and then you're in Dorchester.
Well, the idea is you can walk to the trolley, you can walk to the bike path and walk to the park, whether that's where you're taking advantage of that being in Dorchester, the trolley location anyway. So, I'd say, yes, it's got a high score for walkability to transit and to bike path and open space, but it doesn't have good sidewalk access to amenities in East Milton Square.
But does it have direct sidewalk access to Dorchester? Because there are a lot of good restaurants in that little area.
It does, because the sidewalk
Lucy's
starts
and,
right there at this site. The sidewalk starts
and goes
across the bridge and
to Gallivan Boulevard.
Down at, what is it, Lucy's down there? I guess that's the only reason why I give it a 3.
Yeah, there is some.
Erie
Yeah,
Pub.
that sidewalk, once it crosses the bridge, you're on Granite Ave. It's
Okay.
it's
It
a
keeps
sidewalk
going,
all
yeah.
the way to wherever.
There are some,
So I would give it a 3 because you have good access on one side but not the other.
Okay.
I mean direction, not side of road. All right, and then access to school within a half mile, that's a 1.
Yeah.
Access to amenities, so here you go.
It's definitely not East Milton.
It's not the East Milton amenities, but I give this another 3 then.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people actually walk to those amenities currently? If you live in
Office
that,
building?
if you kind of live, yeah, if you're at work, at that
Yeah,
that
Cedar
building.
Grove neighborhood, there's a lot of Cedar Grove neighborhoods, which I know use a lot of those.
So if
Dorchester
they
side.
would walk, yeah.
Yeah, I think, one thing here is this is at a very border location, but it doesn't mean people aren't going to take a walk into Dorchester, right? So I think then access to amenities within a mile, I would give it the same 3. Does everyone agree with that? Okay. Now we're into other things, the ones that were highlighted in kind of an orange color. Were not in the original guiding principles, but kind of the things that came up. So encourage mixed use / do not lose business opportunity. So the two criteria here are mixed use required and mixed use allowed. So do we allow mixed use in this one? I know it's not required.
I might have to recall, Tim, do you remember that? Because that was kind of outside of the compliance modeling exercise, so we didn't focus on that very much.
So all of the, except for the single-family districts, all of the districts had a mixed use allowed. So this one, East Milton, and then the Milton Village districts, and the Mattapan Square district all allowed mixed use.
Okay, so this would be a 5 for allowed.
Yes.
So it's either one or the other really on these. It's allowed or required, right?
But I don't know if I would push that if I was developing it. I mean, I don't think mixed use survives there. If you limit the parking,
residential above, maybe it might.
there's not going to be enough residential above to support a business down there.
If
You
it's
have
6
to have
stories?
people driving
Well,
there.
it's like 88 Wharf. You know, they have a business in their
There's a
basement.
residential neighborhood right there
Oh, I know, but they
too.
have plenty of parking. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would not open a business in that area, but that's just me. That's all right. If you guys want to give it a 5, give it a 5.
Well, it's,
And I wouldn't encourage mixed use there just because I don't think it would survive, I guess is what I'm saying. Unless you have an ability to drive there and it's a destination spot.
one thing I'd say is that, I mean, the bike path gets a ton of use. I use that path a lot. And there's a lot of walkers and bikers on that path. And
There's a splash pool there, isn't there?
There's a park there. There's a kayak
There's the
launch
marina
There's
there,
all
like
kinds of stuff there.
envisioning.
Kids are going to come from the splash pool and buy an ice cream in your business.
Yeah,
I mean, even
why
if you have 100 units and you have a coffee shop and if you guarantee everyone's buying a cup of coffee, it's only 100 cups of coffee a day.
Yeah.
They're not going to make it.
But it's allowed. We're just all we're ranking is it's allowed.
We're not taking away an opportunity.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's an office
It's not
above,
required
but
and it is allowed.
Okay.
I think what we were concerned about is if you're zoning in business areas, that we're not taking away opportunity, right?
Yeah, I think it'd be a great opportunity for a business.
Yeah.
All right.
Go for
so
affordable housing.
Come visit you on the weekends.
Yeah, so under affordable housing potential, 1.1, density allows more than 10 units a parcel. So that was one of the things we were talking about when you have these larger sites that you actually hit the trigger point, right?
Yeah, that
so
gets a 5.
I would say this gets a 5. This one's not the district includes existing affordable. We were wanting, I think, Maggie, this was a response to you not wanting to lose any existing affordable. I'm not sure, it's really not applying here. Again, not applying on the 40B, not applying on built to full. So then we go to potential to handle vehicle traffic. We talked about this a bit, I think, with the questionnaire too, or the survey. So the parcel frontage, we go to J.2, it's on a 4-lane road, so that gets a 5. And then parcel frontage is on a state roadway. So this was the idea that the state would have the potential to make improvements if they're the ones looking for this zoning. So what's your thought about this one also?
Well, I mean, it should be a 5, but is it a likelihood? Is a 1.
Right.
I think the town wouldn't have to pay for it to the improvements if the state did it. But yeah, I think it was just trying to find ways, like other streets don't have a study which say how they can be improved. So I would give it a higher number because it does have a study for what to do. Whether it gets done or not, it's still better than no study. So do you agree that that's a 5?
So
Or
I
4?
don't understand that one. So over at 2 Granite, if it gets redeveloped, the developer will go to the state and ask for concessions?
No, we're just talking about like if the road, like you're going to pick a place to zone.
Yeah.
If the road is on a 2-lane road that's town controlled, that would be under a town budget to make any improvements to, versus a state road that's 4-lane that already the state has identified and done a study on and said and has recommendations for improvements that for both safety and other. So that as a criteria is a way to judge whether this district has the potential to handle additional traffic. We're trying
Additional
to,
traffic, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I get it.
And Jim, one other thing to keep in mind here is that when you're developing on a state road, there's a requirement to get an access permit from the Department of Transportation. Now there is already a development here. It has a driveway where cars go in and out. I don't know if the existing access permit for that property would count. But any redevelopment here, if there's a change in that driveway access, you would need to get that permit. And what comes along with that permit is, mitigation of those impacts. And there is kind of, a process by which the state has to make sure that the road can handle it, and any kind of safety improvements that are needed, actually kind of happen in a very regimented way.
So I was looking at that myself, thinking that's a benefit over, let's say, a town road that doesn't have those same requirements in.
Right.
In theory, it's a benefit.
So what number are you suggesting?
5?
4.
4.
Okay,
yeah.
put it 4. Good. The next one was just taking it from state, but having been identified in town studies, so that doesn't apply necessarily here. And then the same thing for the next one. It was a way to kind of capture something besides the state roads. So I would say not applicable in those two there.
What,
All right.
the traffic hotspot one and the traffic studies one?
Yeah, because they're already covered in the prior one.
Yeah, I'd say that is a traffic hotspot, and I'd give it a 1.
It wasn't in the report, though.
Granite Ave is not a traffic
Not there.
hotspot?
Not there.
Because of a report? When was the report then?
2020.
Okay, stand
During
out.
COVID.
Oh my God. Come on, Cheryl. Stand out there tomorrow and look at
Anecdotally say that when Google routes me on Granite Ave because of congestion on the highways, it hops me back on before I get to this site.
Yeah, it's not. It's
So, something.
Yeah, I mean,
That's how we're judging
this.
this.
It's
Yeah,
just
okay.
I'm trying to use
Jesus.
reports and not anecdotes, but
So-
I know it's a heavy.
So now we can use Google.
So, well, now it's okay.
I'm more saying
Sure.
that Google does route traffic through Granite Ave as an alternative, and I think that's probably not having an insubstantial impact on you all.
All I know
drive
is
Granite-
that's a
I drive
traffic
Granite
hotspot.
Every morning I drive Granite Ave. And most mornings I'm backed up the Hope Ave, trying to get on the, and it takes me 7-8 minutes.
Would go up to Gallup Boulevard. I don't think they would.
But when you come home, is it traffic at 5?
Well,
I never
the
went
off-ramp,
at 5.
the off-ramp, Cheryl, is, the off-ramp, of course, is in a different direction, right? It's down by California Ave. So, I usually don't get off at Granite Ave. I get off at California Ave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
My point is, if we're looking at this and we're calling it, I'm sorry.
I'm with you, Jim. Everybody on Granite Ave complains about traffic, everybody that drives on it. So whether it's in a report or not, it's real.
All right, so we can add a column. I just feel like this shouldn't be under the where it's in a report when it's not. But if you want to add a column that says everyone says there's traffic here, then we can add the line there.
Yeah, I think if we don't,
There just should be a way to identify it as a traffic hotspot, because clearly it is. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the no vote won, is because it's just so bad there. I mean, if we don't identify that, we're fooling ourselves.
Or we just get rid of the comment that says in the traffic mitigation committee report.
But then you can, I would say that I've heard from many people that say there's traffic everywhere.
Oh, there.
And so, I mean,
so everywhere's going to be a traffic hotspot.
Yeah.
Everywhere's going to get a 1.
Everywhere's going to get a 1.
As long as we acknowledge that and put it in, I'm okay with it. But if we just pretend it's not there, that's just weird.
Well, then
to
we
me.
take it away, because at that point, there's no difference in criteria.
And I'm sorry, but to Granite Ave, my understanding is you don't need to go on to Granite Ave. And that's the benefit of this. Because if I was at work there, I would go out to Gallup Boulevard to go into I would go.
You don't need to
take a right and go north.
It's inconvenient to come around the other way.
I would not get onto, during certain times of day, I would not get on Granite Avenue. And that is where this site, you have that option, where the other sites, you don't have an option. You're on Granite Ave,
That's a
period.
good point.
So maybe a 3 on this? Or-
Yeah, I think so too, because you would have to make a U-turn here to get on the highway from there.
Yeah, and I would
so-
never do that.
Which is not a good move in the high traffic. All right,
Unless you're going
so,
south on 93.
so we're saying a 3.
Yep.
All right.
3's good.
And then not applicable on the next one because it's the state who did the traffic studies. Then the last one is flood risk. So there's mapping, there's FEMA maps, and then there's a state map. And I know.
believe we did map that for this site, and there is some flood zone. Let me see if I can.
There definitely is
Okay,
some.
yeah, if you could.
But is that our concern? Because that's something a developer would have to.
It was just something that a lot of people brought up in talking about these Granite Ave districts.
This is
and
definitely
so I thought we should at least identify it as a talking point or a consideration, rather.
I mean, that building is already on piles, right?
Yeah, and
it's already
anything new would
probably
have to be up
complied.
like that too.
Yeah.
You know, something like that where it was, I think, a lumber yard or something before it was an office building, that kind of a business use there. You know, you're not mandated to turn it back into, you know,
So 3, 4.
marshland or whatever, you know. So Zoe, if you find that, we can populate that. Okay, so we
I'm
did.
seeing the Chapter 91 boundary that we have explicitly on the maps that we developed. I'd have to open up our GIS to see the flood zone. I don't have it in the slides right now, so.
Okay, that's fine. We'll just leave it for now and we can fill it.
I mean, this site is very clearly in the FEMA flood zone. I've got the firm map up.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no way it's in Chapter 91 and it isn't in FEMA.
Yeah, and so, and then I don't have the state map up, but I know that the FEMA maps tend to be more conservative. So if it's on the FEMA map, it'll be on the state map. So this is ones all around.
Ones and ones. All right, we did the first one.
And it's 10 o'clock.
So it's 10 o'clock, and I was, sorry, Tim, were you going to say something? Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think our friends at UT will have an idea of kind of how the board is evaluating these districts. And if you were going to continue, I was going to ask maybe they can be excused and we can follow up with them. But I don't know if you're planning on wrapping up or kind of winding down anyway. So I just wanted to kind of
Can I answer
approach that.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Yeah, I don't think we need to run through all of them with our friends at UTL, but I did, if Meredith, think it would be helpful to kind of think about a couple of meetings and like to plan ahead a little bit about what we think we're going to do and accomplish, so we all have the same kind of understanding.
So
I would love that.
I
That'd
would
be helpful
agree.
for
I
me.
would, because I
Very
would
helpful.
suggest we adjourn for this evening. I think this was a really good run through, and you know, I think this is going to become easier as we go through thinking about these criteria. I would like to suggest our next meeting that we really dedicate to MBTA and really go through as many of these districts as possible and hammer them through. And I think we'll get faster and more efficient in doing this. But I'm open to the board if they would like to continue to stay on and discuss more tonight. But I think this might be.
I think it's fine, you know, to take it up at the next meeting. In terms of thinking about, like, UTL doesn't need to necessarily participate in those districts, but I think it would be helpful as we start to think about, like, all right, here's some of what we learned in the public process with the votes, and then have a dialogue with the UTL team about, all right, now that we understand this, like, we have some thoughts about what we might do differently. What would their thoughts be, and have some discussion, because their understanding of the compliance model is so much greater than ours, you know, that they might tell us that something we think is a good idea is going to be difficult. And then I did do some of that granular analysis in the Elliott Street district that I'd like to go over with everyone, including the UTL team. So maybe we set aside some of that meeting that they're not here for, and some of it that they are here for. And then I don't know, like, if anyone's thought about, like, this is all kind of still geared to a rapid transit community kind of analysis? And do we want to do that kind of first, or were we thinking we were going to try and do parallel of an adjacent community at the same time? Or you want to like finish this, then go to that? So I'm kind of curious what people think about that.
I was thinking that we would go through all of these districts and not really even put a numerical percentage on at this point. But then once we have gone through all of these districts, peel off what we don't like and make, and maybe we consider different districts.
Well, that was what I was going to ask. When is the opportunity to add different districts that we did not consider?
That's what I think. Once we have our analysis and say there's definitely districts that we don't like, or we would greatly want to see that reduced, the number of units, what would be what would our alternative be, and where would we look at other sites?
I'd like to have us maybe think about it too as maybe not necessarily what someone doesn't like or not, but there's trade-offs to different districts. And so we can think about, well, and then when we have this discussion with the public, they all see what the trade-offs are, because there's going to be trade-offs, and the more people understand it along the way instead of towards the end of the process, the better off we'll be. I think, we just spent a lot of time talking about why Granite Ave is really a great location, but there were a lot of people during the public process who didn't think Granite Ave was a great location. So we can't get again to these districts at the very end.
There's Granite Avenue North and there's Granite Avenue South, and those are very different.
Except you can't do north without south, so that's the
Well, you can
problem.
reduce south, and you can fit north.
Yeah.
You can make it happen.
So, but it'll mean some units someplace else, right? And so where's the someplace else?
This whole thing means units someplace else. That's why we're here.
Or zone capacity anyway, someplace else.
But I think
But I think these idea about where that goes, how much can you take away from south? I really feel we don't want to get too far down a path without UTIL's participation, because we could just end up having to backtrack.
And I don't want to get too far down the path either when we know, we're going to take off one of the options. We have to be cautious of our time. And if we know, for instance, the statute says that it has to be within half mile of a subway station, we haven't looked at the Reedville station or Fairmount station. So I would like to sort of look at those two at some point sooner rather than later, because I've said it before that there is a statute. We need to follow the statute. The guidelines we're still waiting to hear on. So why not start at the half mile from Reedville and half mile from Fairmount for sure, because I feel like that is a for sure district that we never looked at.
So, and there might be, I don't disagree that we should look at those, but I think, right outside of that is the paper mill that Meredith had asked about before. Yep. Can that get tied into something? Yep. But what does unit? One of the things I was interested in, and I've been looking at, and I'd like to get feedback from everyone, including Tim and UTIL, is there a way to bring up, like one of the things that we can remember about the Elliott Street is only half the parcels qualify. And so we have a lot of land area that kind of takes the density level down. And then we cap it at 3 units a parcel, no matter the parcel size, once it's 7,500 or above. So we don't have to expand the district. If we tinker with it a little bit, can we get some more capacity there so that we need less someplace else?
Yeah,
so that's that takes some careful kind of granular analysis, but that could help us with some of these other locations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I have my eye on our existing DPW yard, and it's actually across the street. I don't know.
So I think Randolph Ave was on a bus line. There's the 40Bs that they justify being on the bus line. If we're going to have something outside of a transit area, being on a bus line is that's one of these things that we can score it, right? That's why I think the scoring is helpful, because if it's someplace else that's not within a half mile, or it's not on a bus line, then how do you justify it in some way, right? So
Right, this was
how
good.
does
This was
that, how does that sound to you, the UTL team?
That sounds like a good process. I think the only sort of thing I'd add into the mix is if there are things that you know you're going to want us to study, even, you know, I think as you're going through this process, I think is, you know, a great way to get like a really methodical, you know, process going to be deliberate about how we make adjustments. It also sounds like there might be some things that you already know you're probably going to want us to look at. And so if that's the case, we can get started on that while you kind of go through the full rating. But if that feels premature, then we wait until the point where you have that full kind of breakdown of the scoring and go from there. And I think having you know, at the next planning board meeting, if maybe you could start with some of the things that you really want to have us, you know, hear from you, and then you can maybe finish out the meeting with the remaining scoring. I think that could be a good use of time, and that gives us a little bit of kind of food for thought to keep moving.
Exactly. I think that's a great idea. And then you wouldn't have to stay on that whole meeting either, because, you know, we could go through and then touch base the following meeting.
Yeah, and if there's anything that you need kind of, you know, clarifications from us on that are kind of more like technical aspects of that rating, happy to do that kind of over email to do a final kind of cross check.
That next meeting would be June 13th. Is that a date that you're available?
Let me take a look.
We have June 13th, and then we have another meeting on June 27th.
13th looks good for me. Matthew, are you all clear on the 13th?
That's a definite maybe.
Okay, well, let's
it
put it in.
is what it is.
And then you said, what was the other one? It was the
27th would be the second meeting. And we'll be heavily covering MBTA as our primary focus on both of those meetings.
Okay, just gonna look at that one as well. Just gonna stop sharing for a second just so I can do this more quickly.
So one thought I had, I'll throw out while you're doing that, Zoe. We haven't spent any time sort of thinking about that adjacent community option, right? We could ask Zoe, Matthew, and JT to think about how they would approach that. Because really Tim gave us some, you know, early idea about that. But I think that could be something useful that doesn't need anything further from us at the moment. One thing about that. I'm sorry, Zoe.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that Tim said to us is the district wouldn't have to be so tethered to the trolley, you know, in an adjacent community. So it might be maybe a little bit harder to figure out where it would make sense to do it. But if you want to, I think that's an area that you could talk with Tim about and give some thought to before we meet again.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think we also will need to, you know, in all of the cases we've worked in so far, we have state provided compliance targets. For this exercise, we will need to generate compliance targets based on the state's rules for generating compliance targets. So that in and of itself will take us a little bit of time to just get that right so that we're starting from a set of targets that are, you know, logical and consistent with the guidelines overall. So I think that makes sense, and we can get started on that and discuss with Tim the specifics of what that looks like.
Excellent. That's great. Okay.
Cool.
Good. So is there anything else, Tim, that you would want to add before we have a motion to adjourn?
No, I think this is all good. Thank you.
Great. Sean, you're on Zoom. Is there anything that you had?
No, thank you.
Okay. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn for the evening.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Jim?
Aye.
Maggie?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Have a nice long
Good
weekend,
evening.
everyone.
Yes.